Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Yeah, I've still got the Julian Hartley-Brewer voice. Thank you very, very much to Peter Cardwell for stepping in a couple of days last week. And, of course, brilliant, wonderful Cardwell. And, of course, Alex Phillips as well on Friday. But I am back in the hot seat and hopefully still not going to infect the wonderful Sam Armstrong, who's a Conservative commentator who joins us this morning. You're looking wary. He's already disinfected the seat that I was sitting in, the desk that I was sitting in a few moments ago.
Yeah, well, after having got the 100-day cold from you just before Christmas, just having recovered,
you're such a moaner.
to come back into what is patient zero is a invidious moment.
I mean, can you feel the love, people? Can you feel the love that's coming out? Anyway, I've not touched anybody. I've been very good. I'm coughing into my, doing the old elbow. But anyway, I am back, and it'd be great to hear from you today. I particularly want to hear from you today about what on earth is going on in the Reform Party, because we've got this talk about civil war, bitter recriminations going on, particularly between the party leader Nigel Farage and the chairman Zia Youssef, and the MP, now no longer a Reform MP, Rupert Lowe. To all intents and purposes, Reform are down to not just 4 but 3 MPs, really, given that one of their MPs, because of his past, has basically told, please just keep strum, don't say anything, just do your constituency work and say nothing else. But I want to know, is Reform UK facing a civil war as Nigel Farage battles with Rupert Lowe? Whose side are you on, and who's the real winner? Because it seems to me the Tories are the real winner there, are they not? Do tell us why you think what you think as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk, then your message to 87222. Also, you can send us a message on X at Talk TV. I have to say this bit, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Also, going to be talking about the latest on Ukraine peace talks in Ukraine, starting today. Tomorrow, Zelensky is in Saudi Arabia today, although he's not going to be there to talk with the American representatives when they arrive tomorrow. But Donald Trump has said Ukraine may not survive and could cease to exist as a sovereign state as they continue to put up more pressure on Zelensky to give up territory seized by Russia. Interesting also to hear that one of Starmer's advisors, Jonathan Powell, is advising Zelensky's people on perhaps how to handle Donald Trump. Plus, we're going to be talking about the bid to cut Britain's benefits bill. 80 Labour MPs are said to be opposing the government's plan to cut the benefits bill. Part of this is needed, of course, to pay for defence spending, but also just generally, why on earth are we paying millions of people who apparently are claiming sickness benefit way above any other Western nation state? We simply can't afford to do it. Plus, news from Canada. The former Bank of England Governor Mark Carney, Ramona-in-chief, he is going to be the new Canadian Prime Minister, but for how long? Of course, he won the Liberal Party leadership after a landslide victory following Trudeau's resignation. He vowed to push back against Donald Trump amid the US trade war and annexation threats of Canada being the US's 51st state. But will he be able to take on the rival Poilievre, who I have to say otherwise was hands down to win the next election? So all of that to talk about. Loads more coming up. As I said, love to hear from you on any of the topics we're talking about, but in particular about Reform UK and their infighting. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. So let's come back to Sam Armstrong. Finish moaning about me. I suppose you're not moaning. As you look, you're a Conservative. You're not moaning at all about what's going on in Reform UK. I mean, all-out civil war, as far as we can gather. Now, we're not talking about, blocks of MPs versus other blocks of MPs. We're talking about the leader, Nigel Farage, the Messiah, as he's been described by Rupert Lowe, who is the great Yarmouth MP and was, until the end of last week, a Reform UK MP, and also Zia Youssef, the party chairman, appointed by Nigel Farage. They, along with, it would appear, Richard Tice, the deputy, they basically saying Rupert Lowe's no longer welcome in the party. There have been claims and counterclaims about allegations that he has made verbal threats repeatedly to Zia Youssef, the chairman. These have been denied by Rupert Lowe. Briefings yesterday, it is claimed, Rupert Lowe in a post on X said, briefings going out from senior figures in the Reform Party that he is suffering from dementia, and that's why that explains it is claimed his anger outbursts and things. He completely denies that. It's all got very nasty. It's got very, very personal. Who's the winner in this?
Well, it's no doubt that Reform is in a difficult spot here. I mean, if this was the Tory party, this is 20% of their MPs. This would be more than enough to have a ballot at the 1922 committee and all of the rest of it. This actually puts into some sense of perspective the Conservative Party's own infighting troubles. But here's the truth of it. Actually, all parties have this kind of trouble with, people not getting on, big personalities coming together. Might surprise people to learn that politics attracts big personalities in the first place.
No, funny that.
So you are going to end up with more of this. Now, the question is how they handle it. And I have never, ever, ever seen a party handle one of these issues this badly before. And it's a pitiful shame, actually, for Reform that they've ended up in this place. They were riding the tide. They were doing very well.
Top of the polls.
Top of the polls. And then they've gone into this and they have just botched it. I mean, look, let's just say they wanted to get rid of him. There were dozen ways they could do it better. In particular, this supposed police complaint that Zia Youssef has made, or it is a police complaint, but about a supposed threats that Rupert Lowe has made.
Denied by Rupert Lowe.
The allegation was made to the police several months after it occurred, the day after he'd given a newspaper interview in which he'd been critical of the current structure.
Talking about the Reform Party, how basically they have to move on from being a protest party run by the Messiah, i.e. Nigel Farage.
I'm almost not so worried about the legal reality about this, because it's clear to me the police are never, ever going to take forward an allegation in which there is such an obvious motive for having made it. And this is where where Reform have got themselves into a right tickle, because they could have absolutely turned around and said, look, we've had these 2 allegations from a member of staff. Can you not go on the media for the minute? We're going to let this independent KC do the work. And they could have left it at that.
Kept it private.
Dealt with
but
that.
There's an investigation.
But and just let the investigation take place. And they could have got rid of him very easily. Instead, they have botched it. They have allowed egos to come through.
You're not going to get rid of a prominent MP. Now, there's no one here is pretending that Rupert Lowe, he's been a regular on the show, along with many other Reform MPs. Many others, there aren't many others, the other ones, other than the one who's not allowed to do any media because of issues in his past. Again, I'd like to point out, dealt with by the courts, so I'm not entirely sure why that should be, constantly brought up. But they've got 5 MPs, but they're effectively 4 MPs. They are making a fantastic impact in the House of Commons and in the media, and like they really are. And yet, Rupert Lowe has been a fantastic performer. Some of the things he said, things like, wanting to have mass deportations. I mean, yeah. Well, we shouldn't deport illegal migrants? Well, what should we do with illegal migrants? I'm thinking deporting illegal migrants seems to me to be a pretty obvious solution. I don't think there's anything far right or questionable about that. Like, are you allowed to be here? No. Well, then we'll get rid of you. Ta-da! I mean, who's sane disagrees with that? But he's, of course, he got that support from Elon Musk, those tweets over the Christmas, New Year period, saying that he would make a better leader. Although interestingly, he agrees with Nigel Farage that, the Tommy Robinson has no place in the Reform Party. I can't really work out what the difference of opinion is. Now, these claims that there have been briefings that dementia may be behind the issues and that they're talking about, wild sort of anger outbursts from Rupert Lowe. There was a scene in the House of Commons near the end of the term before Christmas. Look, Rupert Lowe has said this is an outrageous claim. He's also made claims, though, about the KC, the barrister appointed to investigate, saying the KC was basically saying there was no claim to answer, he'd not done nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. I'm paraphrasing. The KC has now, in an interview with the BBC, said I never said any of that. I mean, we are totally in he said, she said. But here's the thing. There are millions of British people right now who are absolutely tearing their hair out that we've had a uni party for so long. It doesn't matter whether you vote Tory or Labour, you get the same policies. Tories might pay lip service over the last 15 years of saying the right thing on, we're going to, Brexit, independent sovereign nation state. We're going to tackle mass immigration and illegal immigration. We're going to cut the benefits bill. We're going to take back government. We're going to have lower taxes. We're going to get rid of woke. They talk all a good game on it. But the Tories haven't delivered. Now, you might have some people, Kemi Badenoch talks a good game, Robert Jenrick talks a good game, but a lot of people will still say, come on, you were in power. You didn't do any of the stuff you said you'd do. And people are holding out hope either for Reform to win enough seats to be a serious power, even get elected in next election. And they're ahead of the polls. Doesn't mean they'd win a majority right now, a long way from it. But who knows what could happen? A week's a long time in politics. 4 years is a very long time. But at the very least, could Reform push the Tories to actually becoming a Conservative party once again and pushing the policies which the majority of people in this country would support? But if Reform are not a powerhouse, if they're not united, putting egos aside or any other difficulties aside, they don't have that power. This is kind of existential for our British political system, to have a party that is viable and a leadership that is viable to actually put the case for what I would say is the majority view of people in this country. Yeah, I'm despairing right now.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think that both, and I regret to say this, Nigel, but a lot of the people around him, a lot of people of the upper echelons of Reform politics actually understand the transition that they have gone through as a party, which is they are now a serious party, a voice for millions of people in this country, and every bit as much of a party as the Conservatives or Labour or indeed the Lib Dems. As a result of that, you have a moral obligation, you have a moral responsibility to do the job right, to go into work, to get on with people you don't agree with, and just to get through it. And so far, I'm afraid that the antics of the last few days have demonstrated a party that is still, to use Rupert Lowe's wording, in its protest party phase.
I mean, you're lot are laughing, though. Tories are absolutely laughing.
What? They would be mad to laugh, because the truth is 90% of the British public haven't heard of Rupert Lowe.
No.
They don't know who he is. The circumstances that have driven people to reform haven't gone away, and there is nothing that the Tory party is currently doing that is going to bring them back en masse in the numbers it needs to. Well, it's just a sad day. That's the truth of it. It isn't good news for anybody.
Very, very interesting, Nice. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots of calls already coming in. Let's also talk about, I mean, again, this ties in. This is exactly the stuff. Again, Nigel Farage was way ahead of the game on lots of people on this one. A Hamas-supporting migrant who has called for the slaughter of all Jews. He says the quiet bit out loud as opposed to the being against Israel pretense. This is Abu Wadeh. He arrived in the UK on a small boat in the Channel the other week. He's been identified with the campaign against anti-Semitism as being somebody who has been, he's been pictured with a gun, supporting Hamas, supporting all of the, Al-Aqsa, people involved in this, the 7th of October massacre. And he's in this country. Now, the authorities said they are dealing with it. Well, A, they didn't know it was him, is our guess, because why otherwise, being identified. There was pictures of him having coffee in some England, some village or town in England. We're told that they're dealing with it. Do you trust the authorities dealing with this? This guy cannot be on our streets. He is a terrorist-supporting, anti-Semitic, illegal migrant. He needs to be held in an asylum centre and then got rid of very, very quickly. How on earth does this happen? And people like Nigel Farage and other people, people like me, and I think, I think Robert Jenrick, actually, the guy whose campaign you ran for the Tory leadership, making this point that, we don't know who these people are. Oh, well, some of them, by the way, are terrorists.
Julia, this country is a joke. It is a joke. There are terrorists around the world that hate us, that hate everything we stand for, that want to destroy this country and run it into the ground. But they are coming here en masse because they know that all you need to do is show up on a little rubber dinghy and you are welcomed into this country. You are handed a spot in a luxury hotel. You've got your meals paid for. You get a little credit card with your spending money on, and they are waltzing in here. We know that more than a dozen people have gone straight onto MI5's terror watch list. We know that this man is a gun-toting, jihad-loving, Jew-hating lunatic that is now wandering the streets. How many of them are coming in here? We have no idea. What we do know is that the consistent pattern of everybody that shows up on these boats is that they are fighting age men from war-torn regions who have a much higher rate of committing crime in the very relatively short period of time they're in this country than do any other category of migrants. And the only consistent feature with people coming in here on the boats is that they have all broken this country's laws in order to get here. Yet not a single one of them gets sent to jail, which is where they should all be arriving. They should be going into jail, then going back home as soon as it needs to be.
But again, how can someone be put on a watch list as opposed to, if you're having to watch them, they've come here illegally, ship them out. I mean, literally just ship them out. And again, this guy's from Gaza, and it's like, well, off you go, bye. I mean, I just find it utterly extraordinary. I really do. I mean, except I don't know why I'm surprised anymore. By the way, we had this protester on the Elizabeth Tower, the tower that houses Big Ben, over the weekend. His name is Daniel Day. He has now been charged after finally coming down after 16 hours on a ledge several metres up the tower. He's a 29-year-old from Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex, charged with causing a public nuisance and trespassing on a protected site. How the heck was this man able to get up there? I mean, again and again, the security breaches at Westminster are shocking. As someone who used to work in the Houses of Parliament, I've always thought that the security there is, by all means, make me take off my watch when I go through security, but someone's allowed to just scale the building. I mean, look, what a good thing he didn't have a bomb, huh? That's useful to know. What amazes me is, one, great bladder control, sir. 16 hours. Middle-aged woman, couldn't manage that. But the fuss, the number of emergency services that were on that bridge and that were out there out west dealing with this man. I mean, seriously, mate, we would like you to come down. You don't want to come down. We're not allowed to go and get you because there's a risk to us and to you. Fine. Leave the guy up there. I mean, literally, just leave the guy up there, have a couple of coppers there ready for when he comes down. I don't know, you can put a mattress down if he wants to jump down and fall. I don't care. I just don't care about these people. We've got to stop giving these people the time of day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't care if he fell to his death. You take that, when you climb up that, I'm not saying we should push him down. I'm just saying, if you do that and you risk your own life, I'm not sure it's my problem. I'm not sure my taxes should pay for the emergency services to deal with your nonsense.
Well, and it wasn't just that. We had to shut down the roads outside Parliament, which anyone who's driven around London will tell you is one of the busiest thoroughfares.
Tours were cancelled of Parliament for security reasons. Yeah, lots of people, school groups and others, will have waited months to get that tour. It's an amazing tour, by the way.
Yeah. People's lives disrupted, tourists' holidays ruined. This was a massive disruption, all caused by one person. And as you say, I don't understand for the life of me why you cannot send up there there seemed to be a fire engine there, why you can't send the police up there and said, look, we're going to pull you off in a minute. You can either choose to wear the harness or not. If you don't and we drop you, that's your fault. That's your responsibility.
That would work for me.
You're coming with us. You're going into the police cell. You've caused more than enough fuss here. But instead, we have to pander to these people. It's kind of government by the lowest common denominator for the lowest common denominator.
By the way, no protests or demos about the people of Syria, the Alawite people being murdered. It's always just Palestinians. I can never work out what it is that people are so concerned about in just one part of the Middle East. Oh, if only there was a word for it. But there we are. Just finally, very briefly, Mark Carney is going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. He has Justin Trudeau resigned, thank God. Bye-bye. Please leave the world stage. We just don't want to hear from you again, mate. But Mark Carney, the former Bank of England governor here, Mr. Pusher of, fear, ahead of if we voted leave. Completely wrong on, also he's pushed climate change. There's no fear that he does not peddle. Very nice man, though. Our kids were at the same school. I've beaten him in a PTA quiz. Just saying. Feel the need to put that out. We've had a few little moments in the local supermarket talking about Brexit, but very charming man. You imagine the Canadians would love him. But it's fascinating to see him being elected by a landslide, the leadership of the Liberals there, and how that is now threatening the sort of the equivalent of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, who was basically seen as hands down going to win the next election. Who knows? We could end up with Carney as the Prime Minister long term.
Yeah, what gets me is we have all of these independent heads of these neutral bodies that all of a sudden they just retire into the fact, and they all turns out to be left wing.
It's amazing that.
We had Sue Gray, we had Patrick Vallance. Oh yes, Patrick Vallance, the Chief Scientific Officer. Independent, cannot be questioned in any way. His views are totally science-based, etc. And then what does he do upon retiring from the job? Oh yes, he takes up a Labour peerage, joins the Labour government.
And no political views whatsoever. We're going to get onto the COVID and that day of reflection yesterday. I'm just... fury I feel about that. We'll come on to that with Carl Hannigan later in the show. Right, 10:22 is the time. I want to get to a break, and we're going to get to your calls with Reform UK facing a civil war as Nigel Farage battles with MP Rupert Lowe. Whose side are you on? And tell us why. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
What do we gain from having Ukraine in the middle of Europe occupied by Russia if the peace isn't...
Well, it's not going to be... It won't be occupied by Russia because he's going to do the mineral deal. America will then have skin in the game. They'll be... Ukraine will be full of Americans. Putin will never invade. And by the way, Putin is so depleted by this war that he thought he would win in 2 weeks that he won't have the ability to invade anywhere, I would suggest, for a decade.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Let's get straight to your messages and your phone calls coming in thick and fast about what's going on with Reform UK. I know there are other things going on. We're going to be talking about Ukraine again. Yes, I'm a Ukraine shill. Yes, been getting all those messages. Thank you. But we're going to be talking about what's going on there in a few moments and those peace talks in Saudi. First up, let's get your messages. Paul has said... asking whose side are you on in this civil war reform. He says he's on Rupert's side. There's something off about Nigel. He surrounded himself with some awful advisors. Zia needs to go as well. That's Zia Yusuf, the chairman. Ness says not about sides, it's about right and wrong. It's about lies and slander. It's about dirty politics. Reform is finished. Maybe not today, not tomorrow. Will be a slow decline. Ian says Rupert Lowe, without question, is who he sides with. He's the only one pushing for real mass deportations, while Farage is too busy purging those who challenge him. The party belongs to the people, not Nigel's ego. Brenda says, been following Nigel since he was an MEP and leader of UKIP, and I have to say I'm very disappointed. Our country needs more people like Rupert Lowe. He's a man of his word. I won't trust reform, while Zia Yusuf is chairman. Tim says Musk was right. Farage should not be leading reform. He's disgusting. Bring back Rupert Lowe. That's interesting. An awful lot of support there for Rupert's side. Let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Ben is in Bristol. Hello, Ben. Whose side are you on, if anybody's?
None of their side, and I voted for them.
Yeah.
Listen, mark these words. All 5 of you, if you're listening now, no, 6, if you include Zia, you're a bunch of pompous, self-serving fools. You're ahead in the polls at 28% or whatever. You've got all the right ideas, and you're acting like twits.
Thank you for the edit there.
yeah, twits with an I. Firstly, Rupert Lowe. Why did he go to the Daily Mail? Can't he be honourable, even if he's?
Well, he was doing an interview. But MPs do interviews. It was an interview with Andrew Pearce.
No, not like that. You don't do that. Can't they just be honourable and just sit on their hands a bit and be a bit more mature about it? But then Farage and his henchmen, they start suddenly flinging all these allegations and stuff like that, and as if the Reform voters don't see through this. There's coming out. If this was the Tories, Farage would be saying you're treating the voters like fools. Do you not? He would
say exactly that.
Do you not think you see through? I've met Nigel Farage, right? So I'll tell you quickly what happened.
Yeah.
I like the guy. I think he's a great guy, and I met him, and I was chatting with him. I was the only guy I chatted to him. This is when he was very unpopular, yeah. But midway through the conversation, some guy interrupted, had a big go at him. And I'm not, not a baby. I can get over this. But Farage just walked off without just saying cheerio to me. That says, and he was really friendly before he did that, yeah. But it just tells these guys they're not quite. They don't really know how to handle people.
I mean, I've been with Nigel many times when he's had people having a go at him, and he's taken them on. But there are times you go, I can't be bothered with this. I've got other things to do.
You could have said goodbye to me, Julia. I'm a grown man. I can tell you, but a nice thing to say. Sorry, Ben, I've got to go, mate. But these people, they've got all the right political ideas, but they're all as bad. They're a bunch of what I said. And,
okay, so you're saying they all need to behave now. If Nigel Farage and Richard Tyson and Yusuf are basically saying Rupert Lowe can't be in the party anymore, and Rupert Lowe is accusing them, there's always counter accusations of lying about him and blah blah blah, then there's no love lost. They're not going to be able to move on from this, are they?
I hope so. I mean, nobody's bigger than Farage. He's the leader, and he will go on. And I still respect him, but we can gripe about him. But he's got to learn something from this, yeah? And so has Rupert Lowe. They've all got to learn to grow up, stop putting their careers in the country what matters. Look at the state of our country. We're in a terrible mess. And people had mist in their eyes when they saw reform coming forward. They thought, flipping heck, they're not perfect, but they're not like the two-party systems. They're not sold.
Basically, you're saying put your country first is basically what you're saying. Ben, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. I'd like to point out, by the way, we did, of course, bid for all of the people involved in this to come on the show. We're going to be talking to Ben Habib later. He's a former deputy leader of Reform, and of course had his own battles with Nigel Farage. But of course we did bid for all of the Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage, dear Yusuf, Rich Tice to come on the show. But all were remarkably busy today. Let's go to another phone line. Jamie is in Essex. Jamie, whose side are you on, if anyone's?
Well, I tend to agree and concur a lot with what Ben's just said.
Yeah.
I've always been a huge admirer of Nigel Farage. There's no doubt of his influence in British politics. But, I mean, what we've seen is, Chairman Zia Youssef has said publicly he wants high-calibre, quality people to come along. But it seems every time they get these type of people, they've thrown under the bus. Now, if they want yes men, the old proverb says, yes man is your enemy, a friend will disagree with you, and... it is any. I read the article that Rupert Lowe did, and it was, it was very mild criticism, and and a lot of it I consider valid, and so what I've seen. Sorry,
I was going to say, no, but here's the thing. It's like, again, people say, oh, well, he's allowed to make criticisms, free country, blah, blah, but, you can't, if you're employed, you're effectively, that's your boss. Nigel Farage is their boss, yeah? You can't actually, I couldn't go and do an interview where, and by the way, I wouldn't want to anyway, but if I had problems with my boss, I couldn't do an interview where I criticised my boss and then think that was absolutely fine. I wouldn't want him to do an interview criticising me,
Yeah, but I agree with you, Julia, but if you look at the history and that it's littered with people who have fallen out with Farage. They've all tried, it seems. Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe, and I can name many more, have all tried to get behind the scenes, do it, and it's not listened. Now, what we're seeing under Zia Youssef, I think, is a watered-down version of what Nigel Farage was. And the only people saying the unpalatable truths that need to be said are people like Rupert Lowe and Robert Jenrick. I can't see what's happened. Farage is not the man I knew and saw before in politics. He's much more. He seems to be a shadow of what he used to be, and he's withdrawing on a lot of things that people supported him about.
That's it. That's interesting. Well, hopefully we'll get Nigel on one day this week and talk to him about that. Thank you very much indeed for that call, Jamie. Do you see that, Sam Armstrong?
Well, look, there is a policy difference between Nigel Farage and Robert Jenrick. Robert Jenrick in his leadership election did call for mass deportations of hundreds of thousands of people.
Deportations of people who have no right to be here. It's not a controversial policy.
Well, Nigel Farage is finding himself incapable of saying it at the moment, and that was a big disagreement between him and Rupert Lowe.
Is that about trying to sort of, quote, detoxifying the brand?
It's absolutely about that. But I think it's an interesting issue for Farage to have drawn the line on, because I think there is such widespread support for a basic principle, which is if you're in this country illegally, you have no right to stay here. We're going to go, we're going to find you, and we're going to send each and every one we find back.
It might be controversial at the BBC or, again, at North London dinner parties, but it's not controversial to anyone sane. 10:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking about what is going on in Ukraine. Why on earth Saudi Arabia is hosting peace talks? Like, why is a man who ordered the murder of a journalist, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, why is he suddenly the peace broker? Who are the peace brokers in our world anymore? We'll talk about all of that with Tobias Elwood up next. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. With me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong's still with me as well. Let's talk about Ukraine with Tobias Ellwood. He's a former Defence and Foreign Minister, a former Conservative MP, and joins us now. Tobias, thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning to you.
Now, of course, when this goes out on social media, it'll just be a bunch of two Ukrainian MSM shilling for apparently the attacker, the aggressor in this war, because that seems to be what an awful lot of insane Elon Musk-led social media seems to think these days. But there we are. The world is a strange place. We are in very, very strange territory when we have got Russians, the Americans and the Ukrainians and indeed European advisors, including the Prime Minister Keir Starmer's advisor Jonathan Powell, travelling to Saudi Arabia for peace talks. Zelensky meeting with Crown Prince Saudi Arabia today. A man who, again, we know, ordered the murder and dismemberment of a journalist in Istanbul. Quite extraordinary that this man is somehow the peace broker. How did that happen in the first place?
Yeah, these are good questions. I mean, you normally look for a third party to bring the various stakeholders together.
I mean, let's go with Norway, Arabia. You know what I mean? Rather than Saudis or Qatar as we deal with Hamas.
Well, Qatar would come with its own baggage. Norway is part of NATO, so Russia would refuse that. Saudi Arabia has stayed out of this, but you're right. I mean, where can you now choose to go as a neutral place in order to discuss these matters? Don't forget, Donald Trump made this promise when he was standing for election to bring all the characters round the table. So on face value, I suppose you could say this is good news. But what has shocked Europe, and including Britain, is how open Trump has become in supporting not Zelensky, but President Putin himself, calling Zelensky the dictator, voting with Russia at the United Nations, cutting off that critical military support, pursuing a mineral deal, and now that vital intelligence sharing. And it's worth just stressing that a bit. The absence of which Russia has taken full advantage of. US intelligence was critical in helping identifying incoming missiles and drones. And without it, drone salvos got through on the weekend, hitting Ukraine defenses and their infrastructure. So as we discuss where this goes now, the US decision also to halt cyber operations against Russia. This impacts the UK too. Not a day goes by when we're not subject to a cyber attack. So there's some bigger questions for us to grapple with, not just what's next for Ukraine, but what on earth do we do about America cozying up to our adversary?
Yeah. And this is the thing. I mean, it's fascinating. We understand that Starmer is looking at getting his sort of, the coalition of the willing to help with Ukraine, getting people, basically everything publicly agreed by the end of this week. We're still not sure, other than France, not quite sure who else we've got who are willing to offer troops for peacekeeping. Again, we're not talking about British and French troops being sent to the front line of Ukraine. We're talking about peacekeeping troops after any ceasefire is agreed, if it is. But again, there's also some talk about Four Eyes intelligence sharing rather than the Five Eyes, which of course is basically the Anglosphere, Canada, Britain, America, New Zealand, Australia, and basically taking America out of it, having a subgroup effectively so they can share information, because concerned that actually they can't pass information to America because Donald Trump gets it, it'll end up in Russian hands. There is now serious concern about his relationship with Vladimir Putin, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many times you and I have discussed where Ukraine is going. I never imagined that we'd now be posing those very difficult questions. Could America leave NATO? Could America walk away from the Five Eyes community? Could America dial back from Europe? Could America saddle up and work with President Putin, bringing him in from the cold? This is game-changing and absolutely right. You mentioned, made a joke at the beginning about many of your viewers perhaps calling us the warmongers and so on. This is the reality check that we now face. A change in the way we've operated for the last 30 years. Something huge is happening in America, in America's approach, its relationship not only with the rest of the world, with Britain and Europe as well. And we have to figure that out. And at the same time, recognize that Putin will take full advantage of this. Putin wants Ukraine back. doesn't see Ukraine as a country, sees this as a part of Russia's motherland. But Putin will not stop there. That's what we've got to pick up. That's what we've got to recognize. That's quite rightly why we're investing more in defence.
Yeah, indeed. And again, the threats to Belarus, which is almost, a client state anyway, Moldova and elsewhere. And it's interesting, the Poles, who've been very solid on offering support to Ukraine, are basically saying that we can't offer troops as a peacekeeping force. We need to keep our troops and our weaponry here in Poland because we share this long border with Russia, and we simply can't risk our own security. That's how concerned countries are. It's interesting that Donald Trump, and again, every half hour he says something different, but in an interview on Fox News he talked about how Ukraine may not survive the war against Russia even if America continued to support it. I mean, how worried are you about that?
I'm trying to piece together all these comments, and they're so fast and furious, it's difficult sometimes to keep up. But when you stitch them all together, you do get an idea of what Trumpism actually stands for. He sees our world order dying, essentially. There's a new world order that's developing that's replacing it, but we're not there yet, and there's an awful amount of chaos that's taking place. And the Trump sees this as the new accepted reality. US foreign policy under Trump has fundamentally changed. It's giving up any sense of duty to defend our crumbling global order. Out are the international rules and institutions. In are strong countries, strong leaders who get to call the shots in their area. And Trump has joined Russia and China in that way of thinking. Big beasts, if you like, getting their say in what happens in their backyard. And Trump has ceded Ukraine to his new old friend, President Putin.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I just find the whole thing so extraordinary that it's happening. And the fact that people like Marco Rubio and, the Secretary of State and his Vice President J.D. Vance are sort of going along with this. Big concerns among all of the allies. In terms of where this might end, and we've got Zelensky in Saudi today. He's not going to be staying, though, for talks with the representatives, the Americans, coming for their peace, their sort of peace negotiations. He is, though we understand, his advisors getting advice from one of Starmer's advisors, Jonathan Powell, long time, national security advisor, long time involved in Labour politics. Basically, we understand it's about how to handle Donald Trump. Now, if I was Zelensky, what I would be doing this week, I'd be offering some sort of wonderful award, a la an unprecedented second invitation for a state visit with King Charles, just some bravery, honour or something to Donald Trump, and showering him with all the praise and all the love and adulation that he wants to do whatever I'd have to do to get the military aid and intelligence sharing that I needed to save my people. Do you think that would work with Donald Trump now?
Well, what you're speaking about there, quite rightly, is what should actually happen. It's the consequence of if they don't happen, that we should be explaining to Donald Trump. The consequences of allowing Putin to rearm and regroup. The fact that President Putin wants to advance beyond Ukraine. Where does this take Europe? And if Europe is distracted by conflict, a wider conflict, particularly in the grey zone with Russia, we can't then work with America to deal with the wider 21st century challenge, this almighty clash that we're going to see, this geopolitical clash between America and China. I would stress that I can never imagine Ronald Reagan taking America down this road. I'd go further to say it's almost un-American. And we need to help persuade Donald Trump that it's in America's interests for America and Europe to remain on the same page. That's absolutely critical. And it only benefits our adversaries, not just Putin, but also President Xi as well, who's been delighting in us squabbling with each other, not looking in the same direction. Yeah. Let's support Ukraine. Let's absolutely move forward. But if somehow we give space to Putin to be able to mobilize again, then I'm afraid Europe is going into a very, very dark place.
Yeah, again, I'm just still amazed. You say there are people who think that what we're saying is warmongering, when actually this is about preventing a world war, certainly a European war. Can I bring you back closer to home, though? You're a former MP. Extraordinary scenes at the weekend where we had for 16 hours a pro-Palestinian protester with this little flag and his little bloody feet standing, having climbed up the scaled Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben, and a massive amount of security services and emergency services and police being on standby with this idiot who has now been charged. He'll appear in court later today. you were there. Very vivid memories of you at a Westminster attack when you were trying to help save the life of PC Keith Palmer. In that terror attack at Westminster. Are you not absolutely stunned, as I think most people are, that security at Westminster is still so poor that a protester could get in and scale the building?
Yes, I reflected, as you've just implied, on what happened back in 2017, that tragedy when democracy was attacked, when we had this terrorist come in to the grounds itself. And we should put our hands up and say that defences there were appalling.
Yep.
Huge amounts of money have then been invested to try and upgrade the security there. And I was shocked to see that not only did somebody make it into the grounds, but they were then given the space and the ability to then scale a building. In this case, the Elizabeth Tower. That should never have happened. If anybody intruder gets in, that should be closed down straight away. It's difficult to see any other parliament in Europe or indeed anywhere else allowing this to happen, to unfold, to cause such disarray in the centre of London for so long.
I mean, I'm sorry, but he should have been spotted straight away. And I'm so sorry, the moment he is spotted, stop, get down, or shot. End of. Nothing to discuss.
There's various non-lethal ways that you can actually bring somebody down and immobilise them, and that should have happened instantaneously. He should have been picked up on CCTV, and then a quick reaction force moving in, surrounding him and putting
Absolutely.
him,
just
him away
finally,
and arresting him.
A rather more serious security threat is this Hamas supporter, Abu Wadi. He apparently, another one of those channel boat migrants, of course, are all engineers and rocket scientists coming to save the day and fleeing death and destruction elsewhere. He has called for the slaughter of all Jews. He has praised Hamas and other terrorist organisations involved in the massacre in Israel on October the 7th. He arrived here in a small boat. He posted it happily on social media. As far as we know, still walking free. Authorities have been informed who this guy is. Again, what is going on here? What do you make of this?
Well, the laws are very robust. I don't know how many times I've sat with the laws themselves are. It's whether we implement. I've sat in many, many debates where we've upgraded our terrorism laws, that if you incite violence, then you are subject to arrest. And that's what should happen. It's whether or not we have the political will to then step forward and make it happen. And that's what we require. There's some backbone to stand up to this.
But I mean, this guy's posting on social media. I mean, look, can't they just look? Do we not have sort of facial recognition? We could see who this guy is and just go, OK, he's a terrorist. I mean, literally, just push the dinghy back into the sea, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I'm not sure that's the long-term solution, but we both agree that this person shouldn't be allowed to promote their violence and their philosophy on social media in this way. And you need rules, you need laws. If somebody stood up like that at Speaker's Corner, they would be arrested straight away. Why is it that they can get away with it on social media? That shouldn't happen.
Absolutely. Tobias Elwood, thank you so much for joining. Former Defence and Foreign Minister, former Conservative MP. Brief response from Sam Armstrong on whichever story you want to cover.
Well, it is a bit galling to hear former Conservative ministers coming on, I like Tobias, but coming on and saying, we have the laws that we need to deal with this, when time and time again the authorities in the border force do attempt to deport these people and they're blocked by human rights laws because of their children's preferences for chicken nuggets or the rest of it. We have a massive problem in this country, and I just don't think anybody, frankly, in leadership is serious enough about dealing with it. No. And the one party that sort of held out hope for doing it is not serious about leading itself.
Ouch. 10:49 is the time. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. What would you do about a Hamas supporting migrant calling for the slaughter of all Jews arriving on a Channel migrant boat? I mean, let's just process him like he's a normal person we can have in the country, living freely, probably living in a hostel right now, probably not tagged, nothing at all. I mean, just extraordinary that these people are free to walk among us. Do give us your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts also on the civil war taking place in Reform UK. Whose side are you on? Is it Rupert Lowe's, Nigel Farage's? Give us a call on that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to talk about sacking useless civil servants and benefits cuts. This is Talk.
the realisation that people are too sick to work is in itself an issue, and it's a grave issue, and it's an issue for those that are sick, because I think it's difficult to get benefits in this country now. I really do. I think it is.
I think it's easy to be signed. Once you're signed off, I think it's easy.
Well, I
to
don't know.
remain signed
I'm a
off.
freelancer. I've never even taken a day off sick.
No, and of course.
And I've got a heart condition that I'm going to have. Yeah. I've got aortic stenosis, so I need to go and get my aortic valve replaced again in the next few months.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:53 is the time. Let's talk about underperforming civil servants, because an awful lot of them exist. An awful lot of them are being paid by you and me, and we don't seem to get rid of a lot of them. We just kind of move them to another job. Well, government said they're going to tackle that, and they're basically going to pay people to leave their jobs, a la Elon Musk and Doge in the United States. Let's talk about this with William Yarwood. He's from Taxpayers Alliance. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, I mean, this sounds all well and good. A, will it ever happen? And B, will it end up costing us more than it saves?
Yeah, quite. So I suppose I should do a bit of praise first. It's good that the government is actually talking about this, because previous governments have talked about it but not actually done anything about it. I think the last Conservative government wanted to reduce the size of the civil service by about 12%, but as with most things they didn't actually follow through with it or do anything. So the fact that Labour wants to do this at the beginning of their tenure in power is quite interesting. But to talk about whether they're actually going to go through with it and whether it is radical, because McFadden said yesterday that it was a highly radical policy. Do you know how much they're actually going to try and reduce the civil service by?
Oh, God, don't.
It's about 2%, which is not that much.
I mean, it's virtually a revolution. I mean, isn't that they'd lose more than that just simply by not replacing people who retired or resigned.
Yeah, quite. And also, they're talking about senior management. Let's talk about middle management. I remember the last time I was on your show, Julia, and we talked about middle management doubling over the last, 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, why not get rid of a bunch of them? Why not start with EDI staff inside of the civil service? Why not just, clear out or do what, Elon has done over in the US and actually ask civil servants, what have you done this week? Ask them each line by line, what have they done this week? And if they can't answer in a straight sentence, fire them.
I know. If all you've done is attend Zoom meetings this week from home, I'm not sure that you are not surplus to requirements.
Yeah, quite. And there's lots of problems with our civil service, including a sick note culture. You mentioned about attending Zoom meetings. Did you know that actually in the civil service, we found this at the Taxpayers Alliance, over 2,500 years, have been lost in the civil service due to sick leave. And do you know what the biggest, cause of this is, Julie? Do you know what the biggest cause? Anxiety. Anxiety. Because obviously it's really anxious to, spend 3 days working from home, attend Zoom meetings, sit on gold-plated public pensions, which are going to bankrupt the country in a few years' time. I mean, it's a really anxious job. But yeah, look, we're going to have to see what McFadden says later today.
That's Pat McFadden. He's basically the Prime Minister's right-hand man. He's the get-it-done man. Hey, look, I have got to be honest with you, he's got a very ruthless streak, which I rather admire in him. I like a little bit more ruthlessness in government. But do you believe they're actually going to go against this? Because it's like when they're talking about benefit cuts as well and tackling, sickness benefits. And again, a lot of the problems of people. I mean, Sir Julia was off sick 2 days last week, but I was actually bedridden and ill, didn't have a voice. There was a reason I couldn't work, the particular job that I've got. But there does seem to me to be, they talk about benefits cuts, and then you've got 80 MPs going, oh, we don't like this, we don't want to cut benefits. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to cut benefits for people who are disabled and really, really need the benefits and need to have the heating on because, they're bedridden and things. But I do definitely 100% want to strip every single penny from people who could be working and aren't.
Yeah, quite, and that's exactly correct, Julia. And actually, the interesting thing is those people who are actually fleecing the system are taking money away from the very people that you just talked about. The disabled, people who are elderly, people who are, through no fault of their own, have ended up in the situations that they're in. And I really feel for them because actually they're being done in by a system which people are gaming. I mean, on TikTok alone, there's these things called sickfluencers where they show people or how to get round the system and which words to use. It's pretty disgusting, to be honest with you, Julia, because actually it's not just making a mockery of the system, it's making a mockery of people who are genuinely disabled and genuinely...
absolutely. I mean, and it's criminal. I mean, it is fraud. People talk about, oh, there's a low level of fraud. No, that is fraud. That is lying. If you told a similar lie to your insurer and you were making an insurance claim, you'd be prosecuted for it, and quite rightly. Yeah, if you mention the word suicide, that's it, game over, you're definitely going to get your sickness benefits, which is just absolutely appalling. It really is. Can I just ask you, just finally, very briefly, also about specifically the BBC, because again, we do pay their wages. Fascinating report today. It's emerged that lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans, ethnic minority, disabled and female senior managers earn more money than those from other backgrounds, i.e. if you're a straight white man, you earn now less on average than someone who ticks any of the, quote, diversity boxes. Now, I know we're all for, equaling things out and everything. If people were getting paid less, historically, that's not a good thing. But now people are being paid more because they're diversity hires. I mean, how on earth does this insanity come about?
Well, it comes about because of how embedded EDI is in the BBC and across the public sector, Julia. And actually, what you've revealed there is actually shown what EDI is all about. It's not about actually equalising things or making things more diverse. It's actually just because of it's just to remove straight white men from positions of power or from certain positions and make sure they're paid less. Really, it's completely and utterly anti-meritocratic. And like you said, licence fee payers are paying for this. I mean, the BBC is a bit stretched for money at the moment. They're sending out record numbers of licence fee letters in order to get people to cough up, and even threatening to charge people who watch Sky or Netflix to pay their licence fee in order to try and plug their gaps. But quite frankly, the BBC is an absolute mess. The BBC licence fee needs to go, and every single EDI scheme inside the BBC needs to go also, because things should be rewarded on merit. Things should be rewarded on how good you are at the job, not if you're an ethnic minority or disabled.
But also, even they've got quotas. I mean, again, I'd never want to get a job as a woman. The only category I fit is woman. I would never want to get a job because I fulfilled that quota. It's so offensive and demeaning, it really is. So appreciate you joining us at William Yarwood, fighting the good fight for the Taxpayers Alliance there. Sam Armstrong, I mean, all of this is utter madness. Do you have any belief at all that the BBC will tackle this, that the government is going to tackle what's going on in their ranks?
Absolutely not. And this government thing, it just drives me insane, because it's like, oh, fantastic, we're going to take some really bold, decisive action. 2%. Yeah. 2%.
Again, literally, that doesn't even touch the sides.
Why is this even news? Why are we remarking on this? That business would cut
pointing out that it's all pie in the sky. That's a polite way of putting it. So much more coming up. Do keep your calls coming in. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, Oifamo slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal
left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No. There's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and my gravelly voice. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is great to have your company. Great also to have I can't even speak anymore. The company of commentator Sam Armstrong. Great to have you join us. So much more to talk about, including the battles between with Reform UK between Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe. It does seem to be Nigel Farage, Richard Tyzir Youssef versus Rupert Lowe. I think Lee Anderson also on their side. So is it just Rupert Lowe against Reform? Whose side are you on? I'd love to hear from you. Tell us whose side you're on, if anyone's, and tell us why. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can follow and message us on X as well at Talk TV. And, of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost one, standard network rate message. Going to talk about that. Also going to be talking more about Ukraine. And Donald Trump saying Ukraine may not survive and could cease to exist as a sovereign nation state, which is exactly, by the way, what Putin wants to happen. This as more pressures on President Zelensky to give up territory seized by Russia in these peace talks taking place in Saudi Arabia this week. They're starting tomorrow officially, but Zelensky's there today. Also going to be talking more about this Abu Wadi guy, Palestinian migrant. He's backed terrorist groups, including Hamas. He's openly called for all Jews to be killed. He's arrived in Britain on a small boat, identified by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, has said he needs to be immediately deported. But we know he won't be, and that's the absurdity of our human rights laws here. Also, events took place across the country yesterday to mark 5 years since the start of the COVID pandemic. I've never understood why the 9th of March is chosen. It's not the start of the first lockdown. Maybe they don't want us to be talking about lockdown. They want us to be talking about COVID. What I want to know is why the COVID Day of Reflection never actually reflects on the damage done by COVID policy rather than by COVID. Everything is focused on someone else who lost, very tragically, their 87-year-old mother, as opposed to, you know, the 11-year-olds who didn't go to school and the 30-year-old whose cancer treatment was cancelled by the NHS as a result of COVID policy. We're going to talk about all of that with someone who cares about facts, Carl Hennigan, and plenty more besides. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. Welcome, I say once again, to Sam Armstrong, putting up with my germs once again. I didn't infect you last week. Stop whinging is what I'm going to say here.
Well, I did feel a bit of a tickle over the weekend, actually.
That's a completely different story. You're a single man, and what you do in your private life's got nothing to do with my listeners. So there we go. Anyway, young man. Look, let's start with Reform. We were hoping to speak to Ben Habib in an hour's time. He's a former deputy leader of Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine? God. You can tell my brain's still not back on again, can't you, of Reform. He's had his own fallings out with Nigel Farage and the other party leadership in the recent years. He's pulled out of that interview. We invited Rupert Lowe, Nigel Farage, Zia Youssef, Richard Tyzir, you name it, we've invited them on the show. Everyone seems to be going quiet. The only person who's not going quiet when it comes to media, though, is Rupert Lowe. These ongoing battles between them, claims and counter-claims, claims that from the party that Rupert Lowe's made verbal threats towards Zia Youssef, that he's been involved in bullying against members of staff. These have all been vehemently, in detail, denied by Rupert Lowe. However, some of his claims about the independent KC, the barrister appointed by the party to look into some of these claims, there's also a big police complaint as well. Rupert Lowe claimed that the KC had said to him, look, I don't think there's zero evidence against you, blah, blah, blah. The KC, she has come out and said, That's not what I've said. Never have said anything of the sort. There's lots of claims and counterclaims. Rupert Lowe has also hit out on social media saying he understands there are briefings from senior reform figures that he has dementia, and that explains that is. And I know that those briefings have been given. Off-the-record briefings, but that there is concern about outbursts of temper and the like. Again, something Rupert Lowe has denied. A terrible claim to be made against somebody if that is not the case. I'm not sure how someone proves that's not the case. But it's all got very nasty and very bitter. Is this just a bunch of big egos in a small party vying for control, or is there more to this, do you think, Sam Armstrong?
Well, I think on the one hand, it's exactly that. And the kinds of people that have been historically attracted to either Reform or its predecessor parties over the years...
Of which there have been many.
Of which there have been many, are by nature difficult. I don't mean this in a bad way, but if you're the kind of person that has defected from the Conservative Party to go off, you are more likely than the average bear to be someone that, could start
I'm going to use the phrase, I think I'm allowed to, awkward buggers.
Yeah.
No, but people who aren't afraid to rock the boat and speak their minds. I mean, that's what people love about Reform.
That's their great strength. It's a huge part of who they are as a party. The downside of that is they're going to get into squabbles with each other, because if you got into a squabble with the Conservative Party, you're going to get into a squabble over, and I mean minute disagreements over policy or structure or whatever. The problem Reform have got now is that this is all playing out in the public's face in a very, very unattractive manner, and it is going to carry on doing so, because Rupert Lowe is the single most vocal, visible figure that Farage has attempted to purge over the years. And look, there is a long history of people over the years that Farage has managed to have falling outs with. Rupert Lowe is highly intelligent. He's very good on the media.
Very successful businessman.
He's a successful businessman. He's got a huge Twitter following, and he is not going to go quietly. And that means that this is likely to continue over the coming days, and that is going to be damaging to Reform. If not in massive poll numbers, because I don't think it will colour the coverage and the tenor of how people see Reform in the run-up to the local elections, which is where they were really, really counting on having a breakthrough.
And that's the priority. But here's the thing, you say that Rupert Lowe's a huge figure. Look, I mean, he's been on the show many times. I've got a huge amount of time and respect for him and agree with an awful lot of what he says. But again, he's got 320,000 Twitter followers, ex-followers. That's not huge. That's not... His name recognition is nothing close to Nigel Farage. Is there an issue where Nigel Farage is both, the best thing, the biggest thing, the winning formula for Reform, but he's also the thing that is also the problem to a certain extent because of the ego. And yet, it's because of his ego that he's been able to achieve what he's achieved. If you didn't have... Here's the thing, ego is bad if you don't have anything to back it up with. He's got the votes of millions of Britons to back up everything that he's done, whether it was campaigning to leave the EU. He's the most successful, most influential politician of his generation, of my lifetime. And that is a simple fact.
But it's a little bit like a business, a start-up business, Reform, right? It's been phenomenally successful. It's come out of nowhere, and it's been successful because of the founder, because of who he is, because of what he's got. But it's now coming to the point where it's having to list on the stock market, and there's board...
OK, so who's the alternative leader? Who is the alternative leader?
There is
because we know the bump in the polls that happened last summer.
There is nobody other than Nigel Farage that can lead that party. But Nigel now needs to get serious. He needs to grow up a bit. He needs to realise that, he's just been promoted. Welcome to the Premier League. And as a result, you need to bring in support services,
But isn't that what he's done with Zia Youssef, bringing in a business person?
I regret to say that I have spent a lot of time in politics. I know what works in politics. I know what doesn't work in politics. Zia Youssef is the wrong man to be chairing Reform.
Why do you think that?
I think that he is coming in with quite a hard-headed approach from business.
Isn't that what people want? Get yourself organised, proper vetting, get funding, get local organisations, people on the ground doing the leafleting.
I'm sure that in many respects it is good and it is positive. What he's clearly not adept at is bringing everyone together. We've heard falling out after falling out over the last year has one consistent name. That is Zia Yusuf. Lots of people that have been involved for a very long time have fallen out because of him.
But are they falling out with him because he's trying to get people to be more professional? And you know what? No, you can't just put on social media any random thought, or you've got to actually start being a professional party.
But Julia, here's the difference.
I'm just playing
here's
devil's
the difference
advocate
between business and politics, right? If you're in a business and you've got a member of staff that's good, causing trouble, but good, you can get rid of them. It's not going to cause any problem. You can't do that in politics because you're going to have Rupert Lowe now hanging around for the next 4 years.
Because he's still an MP.
Like a bad smell, unless they do come to some kind of arrangement in which they can bring everyone back together.
I've certainly been told that there's no route back for him. That does seem to be the case. Well, look, we're going to talk about this with other guests coming up. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I'm tearing my hair out because I actually like and admire all of the people involved, and whether you vote Reform or don't vote Reform. I think, certainly for our audience, you understand like how vital Reform has been, how vital Nigel Farage has been, and the other people of the party for like keeping some sanity alive in terms of policies, and dismissed as far right and extreme when actually talking about policies which would have been considered completely normal 10 years ago. I mean, and again, policies, I think, that your man Robert Jenrick in the Tory party was pushing when he was running for the leadership. Apologies, the coughing, but can I also just bring to you, in the last hour, we found out the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, she has rejected calls from the family of the murdered Tory MP, Sir David Amess, for a public inquiry into his killing. Apologies. I do apologise for the sound effects, everyone. Basically, in a letter to his widow, Lady Amess, and daughter, Katie Amess, she said that it was hard to see how an inquiry would be able to go beyond the trial of his killer, terrorist Ali Harbi Ali, and a recently republished Prevent review. Press conference being given in the last hour by both the widow and the daughter, basically saying that it is unacceptable, and they said this is adding salt into an open wound, and that they want a full inquiry because they believe that his death, and again, so much focus on Joe Cox's death, not David Amess, but similar circumstances, one far right, one Islamic terrorist. But I have to say, I'm almost sympathetic to Yvette Cooper here. I'm not quite sure what a public inquiry is going to achieve.
Yeah, I'm a massive public inquiry sceptic, because all that occurs in, as far as I can see it, is you shell out millions of pounds for lawyers to come in and write a very long and lengthy report about stuff that you frankly knew in the first place. But there was this, key feature in the David Amess murder that we also saw in the Southport murders, which is Ali Harbi Ali, like Axel Rudakabana, had been referred a number of times to the Prevent scheme, the scheme that was set up. It was meant to deal with these kind of problems. Now, look, I've got some sympathy for it. Like, it's a counter-extremism scheme for people who've yet to commit a crime. It's not going to catch everyone. But we are now beginning to see a pattern, which is young men that show all of the signs of extremism go onto the scheme. They kind of come off it, go on it, light touch engagement with them, and then a couple of years later show up and they've murdered an MP or murdered 3 young girls. And I am not sure that the Prevent review that has been done has got to the bottom of why that scheme seems to fail again and again and again.
And virtually every single person who's been found guilty or who's committed, and then killed themselves, a major terror or even a minor terror attack in this country, pretty much every single one of them, I think I'm right in saying, was known to the authorities. There were concerns. It wasn't like they weren't people who, out of the blue, I had no idea that Sam Armstrong was going to suddenly go and, drive a car and kill 20 people in a market. That doesn't happen. These people are always known to the authorities. We have too many people known to the authorities, but also too many people who, by the way, are not born here, who were involved in these crimes. And I think the level, the level of proof that we need for somebody to be judged guilty and have their liberty taken away from them is one thing. The level of guilt, the level that we need for in a civil court is lower. I think the level for someone who is non-British, I don't care whether you've got British citizenship now or not. If you're not born here, you're not our problem. Basically, is my thing. Is at the point at which there are doubts about whether there is a risk to safety, serious doubts at all. I'm not even. I'm sorry. I think we need to have an even lower bar. and just say, bye-bye, we don't want you anymore, we're not willing to take the risk.
And this is what we're seeing in America with Trump's border czar, is very much imposing this kind of standard, which is to say, look, if you ask the authorities, if you go out there and speak to the police officers, the probation workers, whomever, they all know that there's this bunch of people that are causing so many of the issues, and they will provide you a list. And if they're not in the country legally, if there are grounds for deporting them, and the Home Secretary's got extraordinary powers to deport people, we should be going on and doing them, getting them out of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to get to Ukraine again, but I'm going to have to I'm going to keep coughing, so I'm going to go to a break instead. Apologies for that, everyone. Give us a call, though, 0344 499 1000, particularly about reform or any of the topics we are talking about. Lots more coming up. This is Talk.
What are you hearing on the streets?
Well, what I'm hearing is that, the public support for Netanyahu is very, very low. It's fading away. At the same time, when you ask people, well, who would you prefer? The problem is that there's no obvious replacement. So whilst his ratings, if you like, are at an all-time low, nor is there an immediate solution for that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, finished coughing. 11:20 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Sam Armstrong is still with me. I want to talk about Ukraine before we get to calls. Talked a little bit earlier with Tobias Elwood, who, again, I'm always fascinated at the difference between what we hear on the phone lines here and what we get on X, in particular, on social media. It's like, oh, you're shilling for Ukraine. You're for all-out war. You want to send your, if you had a son, or why don't you send your kid off to fight in the war? Why don't you pick your gun up? You're a warmonger and that. And yet we know the polling is really clear in terms of the support in this country is it for Ukraine, for Zelensky over America and Donald Trump on this issue, even among reform voters who are massive Trump fans. I have been so supportive of so many things that Donald Trump has said and done since he came into office. said I would have voted for him on balance, but again, I think on Ukraine, and I said before the election, I thought he was going to be a worry. I had hoped that he might, a lot of it was talk, and actually when he was in power, it'd be different. I am genuinely horrified, appalled, and terrified out of my life by how he is basically siding with Russia against Ukraine and this. But I mean, do you think there's any chance that these so-called peace talks in Saudi Arabia will come to fruition? And what do you make of things like Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor to Keir Starmer, a long-term advisor to to Blair and others? This man knows how things work, giving advice to Zelensky's aides about how to handle Donald Trump.
Well, I think the truth is everybody wants a deal, right? I think the Russians right now want a deal. I think the Americans want a deal. I think actually the Ukrainians have got themselves into a position where they want a deal. We desperately want a deal. And look, a deal means lots of good things. It means gas prices come down. It means that we're spending less on arms shipments out there, right? There's lots of good signs of a deal. But the question is, a deal on what terms? And at the moment, Donald Trump's approach is allowing Vladimir Putin to put the price up and up and up and up. And my worry with the approach that Donald Trump is taking is actually it makes a deal less likely, not more likely, because if you're Vladimir Putin right now, why don't you just hold out just a little bit more? Why don't you take that region, that town, that railway junction,
I think he'd like to, but can't. But again, if he's not doing the intelligence sharing and he's actually... I mean, we know Ukrainian men, women and children will have died at the weekend because of the lack of intelligence sharing and not allowing Ukraine to help spot incoming weapons to save their lives. The thing I'm still flabbergasted by is that Donald Trump can be so good on Israel and Gaza and very clear. There's baddies and there's goodies, and the baddies are Hamas, end of. You side with Israel in that scenario. And yet, at the same time, basically say, oh, it's an either-or for Russia and Ukraine. I mean, it's so clear-cut, it's embarrassing, and he's taken the wrong side. And he has taken Putin's side. It's just no doubt at all in my mind.
Yeah, I find it bizarre that people on my side of the politics hold some kind of sympathy or even a claim for Putin. They say, oh, well,
he's trustworthy.
He's the leadership of a Christian country and all the rest of it, right? This is someone that has ripped off his entire country, has got rich on the back of it.
He's the richest man in the world, it's estimated.
By some margin, right? He has then gone around and, having defrauded his entire country out of all the wealth that it had, he's caused constant antics around around the region around him, in which he's consistently taken the side of the bad guy.
He murders any opponent.
He murders opponents.
Proper dictator.
And, in places like Iraq and Afghanistan was at times aiding our enemies. He is someone that has killed people on the streets of Britain. This is a guy that is absolutely on the force of darkness, the side of the bad guys. And it is puzzling to me how people can't see that about him.
Yeah. I just find it utterly bizarre. And you don't have to think that Zelensky's an angel. No. Or that Ukraine is a wonderful, perfect country. Like Ukraine is Sweden or Norway or something. No, you don't have to think any of that. Again, I've never seen any battle that is more sort of clear-cut than this, and I find it mind-blowing. Love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. Call me a warmonger. I don't care. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots of messages coming in about reform. Fascinating, actually, to hear your views on this. Danny says, I think both sides need to calm down. Reform can only win with both Rupert and Nigel. Cool heads, please. That's what's needed. I think a lot of people who agree with you there, Danny. Nick says, as long as there's somebody to vote for apart from Labour and the Conservative Party that will actually stop the insane immigration, I don't care. Dee Dee says, always been a Farage supporter, but I'm siding with Rupert. He listens to the public, shares our concerns, is a genuine patriot, and I trust him to deliver for our country. Lost a lot of faith in Farage over this. Rachel says, Zia Youssef, he's the chairman, is the problem. Get him out. It's funny how Reform has been doing so well. Then this happens. I smell a rat. Tara says, I back Nigel and people should remain loyal to him. No Nigel, no Brexit, no Nigel, no Reform. He's well known, so we'll bring a lot more support to the party. I mean, exactly, that's the key thing there. 11:25, let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. And David is in Gloucester. Hello, David.
Hello, Julia. How are we?
Very well. What do you want to say, my love?
Well, it's a little bit this with Nigel. He's obviously a very, very fantastic politician. Nobody can take that away from him, But, and I'm nearly going to say this, that I'm nearly glad that we found out how thin-skinned he is. If he can't deal with this, how's he going to deal with, if he ever did become Prime Minister, how the hell would he deal with other people? I mean, he's just been going on about Ukraine and everything. He's going to need some very, very thick, you're going to have to be very, very thick hinds.
What thick? Well, no, but he is. I mean, the man has been abused and called, fascist, racist, bigot, xenophobe, you name it, every name under the sun for years. I mean, the claim from the main rump of the party leadership is that, I mean, we're told, that there's briefings about they're concerned about Rupert Lowe's behaviour. They believe that Rupert Lowe has hit back at this, saying he's heard that the only reason we can speak about it really is that he's heard that there are these claims that he has dementia, which he has denied. And again, it's an extraordinary claim to make without any proof. That's certainly for sure. But if there is genuine concern about Rupert Lowe's behaviour, they say anger outbursts, they claim there have been threats of violence, all denied by Rupert Lowe. I do need to stress that. Look, we weren't there, we don't know, I believe in innocence till proven guilty, etc., etc. Then would you not have to act if any of that is what they believe to be true?
Well, there was a chap on this morning, I can't remember his name, but he's an ex-Nigel Farage...
Gawain Towler.
That was the chap, and he was on with Mike this morning, and he basically said the argument wasn't with Rupert.
Yeah.
He said it's with some of his stuff. Well, hang on a minute, then there's something we're not being told. And if this is an establishment, and I do wonder whether this is an establishment stitch-up, maybe, who's to know, because the establishment do not want reform, we all know that, but, I think we need to be told, but reform need to have stayed in their box for time, to have come out with that statement. I was on the way out on Friday, and I just heard Kevin Sullivan's own show, and he said, they've made this statement about what was being said, and I'm like, what?
Their argument is if we'd kept it quiet, everyone would have come out, and then everybody would have criticised them for that. I mean, I'm wondering whether it ever needed to be made public, if it could have been dealt with privately. And again, it's effectively an HR issue, isn't it? Until you make a complaint to the police.
Well, that's what I think. I just think it's a bit, it was a bit OTT, too blooming quick. Why didn't they keep still over the weekend, get all round the table this morning, if that's what's required, and have a good old chat about it, and sort out their problems, then make a statement if that's what's required. Yeah. But wait, that's my point.
Yeah, but again, that's the thing, we don't know, is it? Because Rupert Lowe keeps putting out statements saying he's appealed again and again and again to have meetings, and I'm hearing from the other side, they've appealed again and again. I mean, again, frankly, if it was up to me, I'd get them both in the room and bang everyone's heads together, but there we are. Really good call. Thank you, David. Appreciate that. Kevin's also on the line. He's in North Yorkshire. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, good morning, Julia. I just wanted to say on the same issue, really. I mean, if you look at it logically, I can't understand why Rupert Lowe's thrown a grenade into the room, to be quite honest. At the end of the day, like you say, it should have all been done behind the scenes. And the problem being is if Rupert Lowe is making a play for leadership, it would seem logical because there's nobody else. There's out of the rest... Richard Tice has held the party but has not led it effectively as Nigel. The other two we hardly know, so they couldn't lead the party, and therefore Rupert Lowe would have been the only...
Well, there's Lee Anderson, isn't there? I mean, the other option. But that's the thing, there does seem to be some sort of infighting, some egos. But at the end of the day, we've got millions of voters, not just the Reform voters from last July, but potential voters now, according to the polls, who are basically looking for an alternative. I mean, you've got to put... At this point, you've got to put the voters first above any personal ego, haven't you?
I can't understand why voters just cannot see that what they need to do is we're talking about saving a nation. We're not talking about party politics. We're all about saving a nation. This party is the only hope for millions of people to get this country back on its track. Yeah. So people talking about, I'm not going to vote for reform. What mentality does that? I just can't get my head around that at all. Yeah. There are issues. The man's got issues. He's thrown a grenade in the room, and I like him. I mean, I love what he says. But why do this? I just cannot comprehend why he's done it. Ben Habib left under a cloud, but it was nothing like this.
Yeah.
And he even then said, keep voting reform. It's something that we've fallen out about, and we've gone our separate ways. But he's still very, very pro-reform. This guy's just thrown a grenade in the room, and he's letting people stew on it, and he's losing votes, and it's just ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous.
I think a lot of people are feeling that way. Kevin, really appreciate that call. Thank you very much. Just final word from Sam Armstrong, because at the end of the day, it's the Tories that benefit from this, isn't it?
Well, I think they will see some short-term benefit out of this, but
people don't like parties that are infighting.
They don't like parties that are infighting. They expect politicians to do their job, which is to stand up for their values and their interests. And Reform has been doing that for the last year, hence their recent success. This is a massive distraction for them. I cannot tell you how badly this has been handled. From a political professional perspective.
What would you do?
What? If I wanted to get rid of the guy, I would have come up with a cast iron case. I'd have spent a few weeks, few months preparing this and getting rid of them in a clean way. Frankly, I would have been much more keen to come up with a way of embracing and using Rupert's talents.
Well, I was going to say, we've got 5 MPs, one of whom just never appears at all. We've got 4. You're literally losing, a huge percentage of your party by getting rid of one of these MPs. It doesn't seem to me to be a good idea at all. We shall see. Love to hear your thoughts. And by the way, any of the protagonists involved, I know a lot of you listen to the show. We've invited you all on. Love to hear from you, the person. You've heard what the audience have to say. An awful lot. I know you can tell from the messages. An awful lot of our audience are Reform voters. I'd love to. I'm sure they'd love to, as much as I would, to hear from you, actually from the horse's mouth. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 11:32 is the time. Up next, going to talk to the brilliant Andrew Fox about what on earth is going on with a Hamas-supporting migrant calling for the slaughter of all Jews arriving here in the UK on a Channel boat. Not quite sure where he is, because that's just fine, isn't it? That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong also still with me. Let's turn our attention to the just tiny, small matter. No biggie, but just, Hamas-supporting migrant coming to this country who's openly, happily called for the slaughter of all Jews, arriving here on a small boat, celebrating, posting it on Facebook. Not even ashamed. Totally open. Oh, here's a picture of me with an automatic weapon. Oh, absolutely fine. This man whose name's Abu Wadeh, arriving in this country, identified by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Apparently, the authorities are now, looking into this. But, I mean, this man was basically loose on our streets just within days of arriving, we believe, last week on a Channel boat, and with his video that he himself posted of the Royal Navy vessel coming to rescue his sinking dinghy, hopeless dinghy. Basically, no shame, no fear, no concern whatsoever that he'd have any trouble staying in this country, despite his support for Hamas and others. So let's talk about this with Andrew Fawkes. He's a defence expert and a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
I have to say, it's the complete and utter sort of blatant disregard for any concern that I might want to keep being a Hamas sympathiser quiet. Support for Al-Aqsa, another organisation, a terrorist organisation involved in the Hamas attack on October the 7th. This guy, no fears whatsoever, and he's probably quite justified in that, isn't he?
Well, there are 1.2 million undocumented illegal immigrants living in the UK, but I think this is probably one of the most egregious examples of what are security threats. Successive governments' failures to get a grip of cross-channel crossings is going to cause to the UK.
Yeah.
The fact that this guy had millions of followers on social media, that he announced his journey from Gaza all the way through Europe, all the way through to
Calais. He's posing in Paris, he's posing in Brussels, it's
openly mocking the flawed border system that we have, and the fact that he's now running around the UK with no real ability to trace him or where he is, it's deeply alarming. And, doubly so for the UK's Jewish community, having someone who's just arrived here that says he wants to kill all Jews. It's an absolute failure in the social contract, quite frankly.
But again, it's interesting that the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, it went on the front page of the Mail on Sunday yesterday, but the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism had identified him a few days earlier. They were putting out messages saying, we've identified this person, we're concerned about this person, we need action. We're told, there are a number of people who've arrived on boats who are on an MI5 watch list. But again, I think most of us are just utterly flabbergasted. So someone who arrives here illegally on a watch list, there's concern about their links with terror organisations, and we're all just supposed to go, oh, that's fine. I just hope they're not living in a hostel at the end of my road.
Yeah, and the fact that he wasn't arrested the second he arrived in the UK is frankly staggering. It was telegraphed so clearly that he was coming.
Well, that's like, I would really hope, given how much the government monitors, ordinary law-abiding citizens' online messages, certainly including mine during lockdown, and we'll come to that a little bit later in the hour, that they're not looking at these people. I mean, they've got, this guy arrives, fingerprinting, facial recognition. If the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism can do it, I'd like to think that our security authorities would have done it. And you don't release anybody until you are damn sure that they're not on a watch list somewhere or should be on a watch list. This is such an abject failure to control our borders and control public safety.
Well, I was quite involved with the evacuation of former allies from Afghanistan. I was part of a charity, and we shifted 3,000 people to safety to various countries. And I have to say, the single biggest problem that we encountered during that process was the Home Office. They were a complete shambles. So the fact that the Home Office isn't even slightly getting a grip of this issue is really no surprise, quite frankly. And I think we're at the point now where we need to start talking about serious structural reform in how we do this stuff.
Well, they could all turn up to work in the office. That might help. We know that was one of the issues. We were covering that every single day. MOD were doing a magnificent job, their men and women on the ground, actually trying to get people out. Foreign Office were all just sitting at home.
Yeah. And, there are structural issues here that need serious reform. The fact is that if you cannot police your country's borders, you have no security. And it's as simple as that.
It really is that simple, isn't it?
If we have people of this nature coming into the UK, not only not intercepted when they arrive, but also not tracked once they're into the country, that is a staggering failure in national security.
Yeah, it really is. It's staggering and yet not remotely surprising whatsoever. Again, another massive security failure this weekend. Daniel Day is a 29-year-old of Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex. He has been charged with causing a public nuisance and trespassing on a protected site after he was able to enter the parliamentary estate and to climb onto the clock tower. That's the Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben. Everyone calls it the Big Ben Tower. and he was able to stay up there for extraordinarily 16 hours. Massive, big sort of security. Everybody and his mum turned up after the fact he'd climbed up there. A, how was he able to climb up there? B, why wasn't he shot immediately and brought down? And C, at what point are we going to think that we might actually want to provide proper protection to the building which is the home of our democracy?
And I'm assuming, of course, that is now Palestine freed after such a brave and daring effort.
Well, I mean, that job done, I'd say.
Job done, yeah, absolutely. Finished. Finito. Thank goodness we can put that issue to bed. But no security system is flawless. And I think we have to be slightly kind to the parliamentary estate that sometimes people will break through. It's what you then do with them after they break through. And the fact that he was allowed to stay up there for so long, that's the alarming part for me.
What would you have done? I mean, genuinely, my view is, mate, get down or we're going to shoot you. End off. At this point, we have to treat you as a terrorist. We shoot you. End off. That's what they do in the States. That's what they do in most countries. You get a warning. We're going to take you down. Simple as that.
Well, I mean, if we look at January 6th in Washington, in spite of huge numbers of people storming the estate of Congress, only one person was shot. I think if this guy wants to hang on to the edge of Big Ben for 16 hours, then arguably getting a cherry picker up there and pulling him down much sooner would have been a far better use of people's time, rather than have a huge crowd sitting around watching this buffoon bleeding all over the parliamentary estate. But the security of the parliamentary estate is, it's a live issue after what happened with PC Keith Palmer
in 2017.
Yeah, the fact that we've had police officers stabbed to death there in living memory, in very recent memory, that someone was able to penetrate that so easily is alarming. And I suspect the inquiry will be pretty brutal. And I would like to see a head roll. Quite frankly.
Absolutely. Let me take you on. I mean, again, talking about pro-Palestinian protesters and a Hamas supporting fighter, a migrant turning up in this country. Latest developments over in the Middle East. Israel, they cut off all aid at the end of that temporary ceasefire. They have now ordered the electricity to be cut to Gaza, and we know that a lot of people are actually living with gas generators, not electricity, but that's vital for the desalination plants that provide most of the water in Gaza. This is all with a bid to. This is not about punishing the civilians in Gaza. This is about a message to Hamas. They want their hostages home, in particular the 22 plus hostages still believed to be alive, held in tunnels in Hamas, and obviously big concerns about their health, given the state of some of the hostages that have been released recently, almost starved to death. Is that an act of genocide? Is that a war crime?
As with all crimes of that nature, it goes down to intent. And the Israelis have been very clear that their intent is to punish Hamas, not the broader population. And so, no, of course it's not. The records of food going into Gaza make it very clear that there is enough food in there to last in the meantime, until such time as humanitarian aid is resumed. And only a very tiny amount of electricity comes from Israel. As you say, the majority of it is through generators. It is the only country in the world, Israel is the only country in the world that is expected to keep providing its enemies with food and electricity.
Yeah.
No other combatant in the world would be expected to do that, but because it's Palestine, it somehow gets a very different treatment to any other belligerent. There is still this incredible strategic tension. It's very hard to say to Hamas, we're going to destroy you, but please release our hostages first. There is now a very limited incentive for Hamas to let go of the remaining hostages, and until that strategic tension between Israel and the US is resolved, I suspect this situation is going to continue. And as ever, it's the people of Palestine who will suffer, but they need to look very closely at who's ruling them, and they need to look
who
at
their
Hamas
leadership is. Indeed.
To be blamed for this.
Andrew Fox, really appreciate you joining us, defence expert Andrew Fox. Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about the COVID Day of Reflection yesterday, where we reflected on the tragic deaths of people who died of COVID. very little time spent, indeed zero time spent, worrying about the people who died of all the other things that people died of in that time. And since the terrible economic and other damage to our nation, to particularly our children, that has been done in the years in the aftermath of those horrific COVID policies. We're going to talk about all of this with Professor Carl Hennigan. That's up next. This is Talk.
He said last night there are people putting it about that I've got dementia, right? He said that.
I have not heard anything of that sort, apart from that speech from Rupert.
Well, he says that that's what people have been saying about him. He's been told that this is what's being briefed about him, and certainly some of the conversations and the explanations of what's going on, a bit like what you've just said there, is that there are several complaints against him. Now, why would you say that? Why would you say that if those complaints are not yet even found out to be substantial?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you for joining us, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to let you know some breaking news that apparently Tower Bridge in London is closed, just outside our studio window, actually. A man has climbed up on the landmark and is sitting on the suspension railings. Closed the bridge to auto traffic, but also to any boats trying to pass underneath as well. Don't know if it's a demonstration or not, or a protest, but yeah, just getting really fed up with these people. I'm sorry. We just got to start having snipers. I'm really, really serious. I mean, I want snipers on the tube for people who sniff on the tube. So she said, having coughed all the way through the show today. But I just think this nonsense got to stop. But there we are. Sam Armstrong nodding away at that, but I'm sure unofficially. Anyway, let's turn our attention to what happened yesterday, because as I'm sure if you were watching any television, you were seeing this all of these very, very moving accounts of the COVID day of reflection. I don't know why it's the 9th of March and not the 23rd of March as we mark 5 years of COVID. COVID didn't start on the 9th of March. Lockdown didn't start on the 9th of March. I don't know why they've chosen that date, but that date they have indeed chosen. It was, though, around the time when policy changed so that it was, let's face it, COVID policy that did a lot more damage than COVID. Now, I'm not someone who is going to make the claims of the conspiracy theorists online that COVID wasn't real and it was all cooked up and it was all a big conspiracy. I had COVID before we went into lockdown in March 2020, and I was very, very, very ill with it indeed. I know people who've been hospitalised with it. I take it very seriously. However, I still don't think that the COVID policy we had was the right thing. But what amazed me in that day of reflection, at no point did anyone reflect on whether or not the biggest damage was done by COVID or was the biggest damage done by COVID policy. Well, let's talk about this with a man who likes his facts. Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Very good morning to you, Carl.
Good morning, Julia.
I have to say, I looked at social media, I looked at some of the mainstream media yesterday and I went, yeah, this isn't for me today, and turned it all off yesterday because it was so infuriating. On one side, people who were sort of going, oh, and it was terrible because someone's 87-year-old grandmother died. Yes, I'm sorry, this is terrible, but nevertheless, people died of things other than COVID. And at the same time, ignoring the damage to children, to our social cohesion, to our economy, all of that. On the other side, people going, I never wore a mask, I never got a jab, it's all a conspiracy. I mean, madness, it seems to me, on both sides. What did you make of it?
Well, look, I think first is to say anybody who's lost a loved one, a family member, will always be grieving and see that as an important issue.
But people during COVID, people did die of other things than COVID.
Correct. I've been working this weekend in urgent care. I've been going to people who are end of life. I've verified deaths, 11,600 deaths in the previous week in the recorded. So that's the issue. But the fact that we are focusing in on COVID and not saying and asking questions about getting to the truth is what bothers me. Yeah. People throw out this number, 227,000 deaths, and they don't even bother to say, when is somebody going to do an investigation? I'll tell you what, me and my team are ready to start asking serious questions. What did these people die of? Yeah. How many were preventable? What really happened in care homes? What are the issues?
But again, like, did they die with COVID or of COVID? Because we know that the comparisons of the death figures for different countries almost impossible when it comes to COVID deaths because they were all recorded on a different basis.
And out of them, ONS reports about 16,000 people died in the period with COVID on their death certificate who had no underlying causes of other diseases. Remember, in some of those, they're in care homes who just had COVID on their death certificate. Yeah. So I think what's happening over the pond, there are many issues, what we're seeing in America, but at least they're starting to question the narrative and go, when are we going to get to the truth? Yeah. What's happening here is everybody was part of that pandemic. The only person who's left standing is the chief medical officer, and we hear very little from him. Everybody else has gone. Nobody's been accountable. Yeah. And you know what? They all seem to have done very well out of this.
Don't they just? Lots of knighthoods and the like doing the rounds. But it's interesting, we've had the COVID inquiry, and again, we know the COVID inquiry is just going to conclude that we should have just locked down earlier. Even some people who just, you know, John Edmonds and others who are like, oh, that's what we should have done, who actually campaigned against lockdown earlier. Now, I didn't want us to lock down, but when we were told by the chief medical officer, the chief scientific advisor, alongside Boris Johnson, that their concern now was that the health service would collapse and people would die unnecessarily, we need to lock down, flatten the sombrero, remember, flatten the curve for 3 weeks. I was in favour of it. Knew it would be longer than 3 weeks, but we were going to get our healthcare together. We were going to basically spread out the deaths to save more lives. I thought they must have good information. They deposed lockdown to that point very sensibly, going with established pandemic policy. I thought they were sensible. And now I know that it was all just on a whim, and it was on mad, utterly mad Imperial College computer predictions, all of which had been wrong in the past, and that pretty much every decision about our lives that was made, whether it was the 2 meters distance, whether it was wearing masks, not wearing masks, whether you could go to work, not go to work, whether you could go and socialise or not, whether you could see your parents, whether you could meet in a group of 6, travel on holiday, virtually every single one of the children at school, rather crucially, every single one of those decisions was made on a whim with no medical, scientific, evidence-based to it whatsoever. And I am still amazed by 2 things. One, that people are not more angry about that. And 2, how so few people are aware of that.
So, look, I think you're totally right here, Julia. Let's talk about the inquiries going on. We've got this issue at the moment looking at the procurement of PPE. It's very hard to understand exactly how much we spend, but looking at the Public Accounts Committee in 2020 alone, it looks like we spent 12 billion on PPE. And 75% of that either was thrown in the bin or was in pure profits. Well, imagine saying to people, we're about to spend 12 billion and 9 billion of that's going to go in the bin. It's insane when you start to put them numbers in. Talk about the schools and lockdown. At one point, 70% of the world's student population was off school. 990 countries locked down schools for more than 2 months. And we look here and think, actually, we're just going to have a nice little memorial. And I turn the news off because I am outraged by the expenditure. There seems to be problems here in the middleman, some dark forces at work. For instance, I'd be asking a question. Why don't we have a PPE factory located somewhere, deprived part of the world, that can increase or decrease its capacity and pay a reasonable price for this stuff, irrespective of whether it works or not? We could have saved tens of billions if we onshore this. What about Ed Miliband, where he's going about his net zero, sending this around the world? So you're right to seriously ask questions here, and we're right, we should be morally outraged and ask real questions about who profited and what were the forces.
Well, absolutely. But again, what amazes me is how few MPs did their job. And there were some amazing MPs who really did work, and how few of the mainstream media and an awful lot of the journalists who were doing this hand-wringing by the memorial yesterday and speaking in, in very dark tones and things. If they'd done their job properly, and I'm talking about a lot of people who were friends and colleagues of mine when I used to work in the House of Commons, just simply did not ask the right questions and don't want to ask the right questions now because it exposes just how bad when the biggest story of their lifetime hit, they basically went, oh, well, I'm just going to go and sit at home for a bit and make myself feel terribly self-important. And the main thing is, we were the only broadcaster in this country here at Talk, the only one that was questioning any of this. And I didn't question it. I didn't question it in the early weeks of the first lockdown. And it was people like Brendan O'Neill and Toby Young, and I had on as guests who questioned it. I'm coming across people like you and Sunetra Gupta and others, and looking into it. I've got no scientific training whatsoever, not maths trained and things. But it was obvious to me as soon as you looked at some of the figures that there was no evidence for what they were doing, and that they carried on. And we saw from, certainly the WhatsApps, Matt Hancock's WhatsApps that were just brilliantly, heroically exposed by my colleague Isabel Oakeshaw, just how unbelievably poor the decision-making process was in government, and the whim that we don't want to give Nicola Sturgeon a good point boost, so we're going to put kids in for 8 hours into masks in our schools in England too. I just find it extraordinary that people are not absolutely outraged by this and demanding, frankly. Again, I'm never going to forgive, I'm never going to forget, but I don't just want a proper inquiry. I genuinely think there should be criminal prosecutions of some people, because I think what they did was so wrong. The damage to our economy, the damage to our children, to their education, to our civil liberties, to our health. People died as a result of closing down our NHS. That people have not actually had to be punished for that.
And the thanks you got for it is, Julia, we share that the government was surveilling you and looking at what you said and following you up, and in doing so, trying to report and mitigate what was going on. Look, I think it's incredibly important. We will start to look at politics and policy when people reflect uncertainty more and start asking more questions and answers. And once they do that, we should start with, I think we should stop the inquiry right now. It's going to cost in excess of £200 million. To be shut down, money's tight, and we should repurpose that money and say, look, let's go and find out what actually happened.
Absolutely. Oh, I'd love them to do that. Carl Hennigan, always so good to talk to you. You've been an absolute hero throughout this. And again, much castigated for just, saying, could we have some evidence, please? Mind-blowing idea. Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. I'm going to get Sam Armstrong's views after this. We're going to talk more about reform and take more of your calls. This is Talk.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer and you are with Talk, the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, great to have your company. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about the ongoing civil war between Reform UK and one of its MPs, Rupert Lowe. It's intensified over the weekend. We'll try to get to the bottom of that. Also going to be talking about the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, calling for all migrant workers to earn at least £38,700 to get a visa. I love how they come up with those numbers. Well, what about £38,600? I mean, you know, or £800. Basically, unless you are coming here and you're going to be a net contributor, you're not really welcome. Also, the Wes Street in the Health Secretary, I find this astonishing. He's going to allow an NHS trial of puberty blockers for children, despite serious concerns about children's safety. The drugs were banned last year in the wake of the Cash Review because there's no evidence to support their use, and there's lots of evidence that they are actually very dangerous for children. So why do we need a trial? There already was a trial. Hundreds, thousands of children were given these drugs. It's not done them any good. So why on earth would you allow another one? Well, we'll talk about that with James Esses and others who are actually going to be launching a judicial review if it does go ahead. Before we go to my first guest in this hour to talk about various issues, including Reform UK, Sam Armstrong is a commentator. He's joining me throughout the show. Sam, I didn't get a chance to talk to you about what Carl Hennigan had to say, but I'm wondering what you made of the COVID day of reflection, and you have to say it like that. And I don't mean to be callous yesterday. I don't mean to callous. I mean, of course, I'm very sad for anyone who lost their loved ones to COVID, but it's this idea that before 2020, no one knew that people died, and in particular, people in their 80s and 90s, who, by the way, are the vast majority of people who died with or of COVID. You wouldn't know that from the coverage because apparently it's just, you know, they seem to think it's a load of people in their 30s, 40s and 50s. But the people in their 30s, 40s and 50s are now dying of cancer and heart disease and diabetes and other things that were not treated and are still not being treated in a timely fashion because of COVID, and specifically COVID policy by the NHS, by the government. It breaks my soul that people are still going on about COVID deaths 5 years on.
Yeah, and you almost don't need a day of remembrance because every single day, every time you try and interact with anything, you are still feeling the long-term consequences.
Absolutely.
Even shoplifting. Shoplifting basically ballooned by a third in the pandemic in this country, and it's never come down. School absences, massively up. The fact that great chunks of the British state just simply don't even work. All of that happened during lockdown. All of these many intractable problems that we're attempting to deal with came about there, and we're still nowhere near dealing with the long tail of, as you say, not of the effects of that disease, but the effects of the extraordinary policy response that we adopted to deal with it.
Yeah.
And there is just scant reflection over this was the single biggest public policy experiment ever undertaken. Did it work? Was that such a good idea? And heaven forbid, if another new infection was to come around tomorrow, should we do it again, or should we maybe look at
if you want to be
really
really terrified, and this really does terrify me, polling shows that actually most people think that yes, we should lock down again if a similar thing happened, which I find so scary that people haven't learned the lessons. But again, people have basically been lied to. They have been lied to for the last 5 years, and people refuse it. And it's the mainstream. I really do have an issue with mainstream media, and a lot of people, and I've taken it, personal battle with quite a few people. You did not do your job properly. While people like me were being spied on surveilled by the government, and ambassadors, COVID denier, non-stop. People like Tory MPs like Neil O'Brien and others. Just outrageous allegations against people like me, Alison Pearson, Toby Young, Carl Hennigan's Connecticut, and many others who were simply asking questions, who were literally asking, but what's the proof for this? What's the evidence for this? The fact that we would follow those policies that were so expensive, we are billions or hundreds of billions in debt. The reason why you got pretty much every problem that we've got right now has either been created or been exacerbated by what happened during COVID. And people always talk about because of COVID. No, COVID policy, which was at the exact opposite of established pandemic policy, which was you don't lock down because you're not going to save any lives. And as we know, and again, as we know because people watch and listen to this show, but if you watch the BBC, ITV and Sky, you would not know this, that the country which has pretty much the best record by a long way in terms of the number of deaths, the actual overall deaths, because it's the number of deaths overall, in terms of the hit to the economy, education, all of that, is Sweden. They lost the fewest number of people, the least damage to their economy. Not a child missed a day of school under the age of 16. All they did was have some restrictions, like you can't have major big events, concerts and things like sports stadiums. Other than that, they went about normal life, and they have had the same, fewer deaths than even other Nordic. Don't say, oh, it's different, there's a Nordic country. No, fewer deaths than other Nordic countries, as well as the rest of the world. But is that publicised? No. Can we learn lessons from Sweden? Yes. Are we going to? No.
Yeah, and look, we shouldn't pretend that, actually the health consequences have ended. I'll just give you one example. Yep. There are 1 million more people now on out-of-work benefits claiming that they've got some or other health condition. We know that
usually
anxiety or depression. We know that the single worst thing you can do for your health is to sit around at home feeling sorry for yourself, not working, not creating. People are still dying to this day because of the effects of the COVID policies that we've had.
Absolutely.
Because people will die sooner, because they're going to sit around and mope, they're not going to get any exercise, they're going to get fatter and fatter, and then they're going to die. It's still happening. It's not finished yet.
I don't even know how people do that. I had 2 days off last week. I was bedridden for 4 days, and I have to say, bored out of my head. I genuinely don't know how people do. I really don't. But anyway, you've got me and my throat and my cough and my snotty nose back today. Anyway, let's go to my next guest, Sam Armstrong. Always great to hear your thoughts on everything. Get your thoughts on what Stephen Wolfe has to say. He's a former MEP, of course, and director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, and joins us. A very good afternoon to you, Stephen.
Great afternoon to you, Julia, as well.
I want to talk to you about migrant workers and all the issues, and this delightful Hamas-supporting migrant who's called for the slaughter of Jews, who's arrived in the UK in a small boat. I want to talk about all of that, but I do just want to talk to you first of all as someone who has worked with Nigel Farage very closely over the years. And you were an MEP, of course, in his party, one of the many parties, Brexit party as it was at the time. What do you make of the battles that are ongoing now between Rupert Lowe and what would appear to be not just Rupert Lowe, the great Yarmouth MP, but Nigel Farage, the leader, Richard Tice, the deputy leader, the chairman, Zia Youssef, and we believe Lee Anderson as well, one of the other MPs. What do you make of these battles? Is this about ego? Is this infighting? Is this civil war? What do you, from what you know, your history in the previous incarnation of this party, what do you make of it?
Well, first of all, I make it as a huge shame and a shock to all of those people who've been gunning for reform to make changes in the country. They're the members and those people who want to vote for a different party other than the traditional parties. And I think for them, this must be really gut-wrenching because they're out there campaigning for the local elections. But is it about ego? I absolutely believe it is, for two particular reasons. One is that we're aware that Rupert Lowe made a speech at one of the conferences and he received a huge standing ovation, which seemed to outlast that of Nigel Farage. And the rumours go round that Nigel was really unhappy about it. And that was followed up by a tweet from Elon Musk that said that Nigel just doesn't get it, and that you had Rupert Lowe would be a better leader. And I think once that happened, you see exactly what happened with Nigel Farage, with many, many people that have tried to either emulate him, become good speakers, good efficient workers for the party, ranging all the way back to 2004 with Kilroy Silk, to David Campbell Bannerman, who was an MP alongside Nigel Farage. When he wanted to become leader, he was ousted. It happened to myself. It's happened to Susan Evans, Patrick O'Flynn. You saw what happened with Douglas Carswell. And then you had Ben Habib recently, and now Rupert Lowe. It is always a strict pattern. And it's very sad that Nigel has to take this route where he feels that people are rising and being good at their jobs, exactly why he's got them there in the first place. But his ego will not allow him or them.
You think he wants this to be a one-man band? Because at the end of the day, he is the man. I mean, he is reform. He was Brexit. He was UK. He is the reason why reform did so well other than the Tories doing so badly at the last general election. I mean, is there anyone else right now, any of these people who comes close to his name recognition, to his appeal to potential reform voters?
Well, you just look at the fact that name recognition is incredibly important in politics. One recognises that, and one doesn't have to dispute the fact that he's done incredibly well in his career. But this really is about going forward. Has he got the capability as a good leader to be able to develop individuals who can sit alongside him and give a broader voice, a broader spectrum of ideas to a wider part of the electorate? That's great leadership. And I've often said that when I worked in the city, and Nigel has said that he is a city boy at heart, all the chairmen and chief executives I said and worked for have said one thing: I appoint people who are better than me in many, many jobs to ensure that I can do my job effectively and promote the business. There is no view of that in reform. There certainly wasn't in UKIP, and there's definitely not in the previous incarnations that he's had. And that's why I think we've got this real massive problem. Everybody will now see it as about ego, whether the right's or wrong as these allegations.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, again, there's so many allegations, counter-allegations, denials and the like. It's hard for any of us to make head nor tail of it. Very interesting to get your point of view on that, Stephen Wolf. Thank you very much indeed. Again, I've invited all of the participants onto anyone whose name's been mentioned, any of that. We've invited all of them onto the show today, but no takers, interestingly. Let's talk about your sort of area of expertise now at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. And this is all migrant workers are needing to earn at least £38,700 a year to get a visa. This is what I know this is being pushed by the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, her Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, pushing this and basically saying, even when it comes to spouses and the like, if you're not earning a decent salary, you're not going to be allowed in the country. Does this is this a worthwhile policy? Is this something that is needed, or is this kind of getting the wrong end of the issue for a lot of people?
I think what's happening is that the Conservatives are trying to out-reform reform. When we just talked about the previous individuals, Rupert Lowe is the only individual within reform that's actually pushing out strong policies, apart from leaving the ECHR, and you talked about deportations, and others are suggesting that Nigel Farage has gone soft. He doesn't really talk about immigration in very strong terms anymore. So you've got an opening ground for Kemi Badenoch, and you've seen it across other members of the Conservative Party, Chris Philps over the weekend, that are developing really strong arguments on immigration. And I think they're beginning to get that. They're quite right in the view that if you come to this country as a worker, you should have a really high salary. What the issue is, though, Julia, is at the moment, the current rate for a skilled worker is $38,700.
Yeah.
So what category is he talking about? Is he talking about those people who are coming on temporary contracts, those who are coming across with companies, bringing them on short-term contracts? Is it family members also have to earn $38,700? The principle is right, but the detail needs to be more clearly expressed.
Yeah, but also, again,
they're on the right track.
There's a massive number of people who come in, for working in social care, and of course they don't earn anything like that sum. They'd be lucky to earn half that sum.
Absolutely. And when you look at health and social care, that's the vast majority of the work visas that were given last year. And I, like you, we've discussed this many times, people who are doing those jobs really do deserve higher salaries for what they have to go through.
Well, they would get higher salaries if we didn't import people to do those jobs, because then the care homes would have no choice but to pay higher salaries because they wouldn't get anyone otherwise.
Absolutely, and a really clever policy by the government will be looking at those care homes and saying, well, we shouldn't be paying VAT on your businesses. We shouldn't be increasing your business rates. Yeah. We shouldn't be increasing the cost to your salary base so that you can pay these people more. And by the way, we'll give more towards training and helping you out as a business. Yeah. That's sensible policies, not the ones that we have at the moment.
Yeah, well, we shall see if anything like that happens. But again, maybe it was a good idea not to have sacked tens of thousands of care workers because they refused to get a COVID jab, even though they worked throughout the period. What do you make also, this extraordinary security threat of this migrant who is known as Abu Wadeh? He basically filmed himself leaving the Middle East. He's called for the slaughter of all Jews. He's arrived in the UK on a small boat. Again, I think you believe he was from Gaza. I don't, amazed that he was able to get out of Gaza. We're told it's a prison, aren't we? But he is among a huge number of people who arrived on boats last week. He quite happily just filmed himself, posted on Facebook, and then him having a coffee somewhere. it was identified by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism as a man who, filmed holding a gun, massively supporting Hamas and Al-Aqsa Brigade, who involved obviously in the October 7th massacre. He's actually openly called for the slaughter of all Jews. Says the quiet bit out loud as opposed to just being anti-Israel or pretending he's an anti-Zionist. He's in this country. We're told the authorities are on top of this. I don't think we've got any reason to believe that is the case. How can a charity like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, how can they identify someone like this from social media, but our security and intelligence didn't? This man walking freely on our streets, as far as we're aware still.
Well, I think the public should be deeply concerned about this dangerous individual being in our country. I think it should be the #1 priority of the Home Office and the police to be able to track this individual down who's made such vile threats. And it's exactly the type of very clear case that both the European Court of Human Rights, the UN Convention, would not allow an individual like this to be in this country. Yeah. Whether we capture him quickly, which I hope that we do, and whether we then get through the process to remove him from this country, we would then see those people, I'm certain, that would try to say that his human rights would be impacted if we moved him on. But I think what we have is a very clear view here that both political parties now have not stopped the boats, have not stopped the gangs, and it starts to wonder why. We start to wonder in real great depth now, when you've had all these years of watching what's happened, what is your strategy for this? Why are you allowing this to happen? And why have we got a dangerous individual like this who's made these clear threats, who is a clear threat to the people of this country to come here? You've got to stop this, and you have to do it rapidly. Otherwise, we're asking, why are you not doing it?
Yeah, I have to say, I find it extraordinary. I mean, we know perfectly well he'll be able to use human rights legislation once again, and some idiot woke judge on a tribunal will say, well, he probably might face some difficulties if he returns to the Middle East. Like, not my problem. I just think the British people are now at the point where they're just saying that is not our problem anymore. It is just extraordinary, isn't it? So good to talk to you today. Stephen Wolfe, former MEP, Director at the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Sam Armstrong, so much I want to bring you in on. There's also some other breaking news I want to ask you about. But I mean, in terms of dealing with the migration issue, and all migrant workers should earn basically what a skilled worker is required to earn. I mean, at the end of the day, unless you earn, I think, well over 45 grand a year, if you're born and bred here, you are not a net contributor financially to the country. Now, I'm very much of the view that somebody who sweeps the streets, works as a hospital porter, does more essential work than I do, or you do. Let's be honest. They can cope without us. We can't cope without those people. So it's not in any way to denigrate people's work. But in terms of someone coming from abroad, why on earth have we been allowing people in their millions to come from abroad to do jobs which pay minimum wage when we know that those people are going to be a net drain? But even once you add in, the husband and wife and the kids, a massive net drain on the nation's coffers.
Yeah, and this is actually a very small announcement. I mean, we should be clear here. Like, the skilled workers are already on this salary threshold. It was a policy that the new Conservative group had called for, then Rishi Sunak implemented. But we're talking about adding it to a couple of little side categories, not touching some of the rampantly abused schemes like the care worker schemes. Just one statistic, in a couple of months at the beginning of last year, they looked at the number of dependents the average care worker from Zimbabwe was bringing. The average care worker from Zimbabwe in those 2 months brought 10 dependents.
That's a lot of kids. But again, you're dependent. What, they're bringing in their, mum and father-in-law, and
it's not a migration system. If you're saying one person, if the anchor chain that you get down is 10 further people, and nobody can contribute to the economy if you've got 10 dependents coming with you that we've got to put through schools, got to provide benefits to, all of the rest of it.
Street lighting. I mean, you're talking the most basic, services.
And then we wonder why we have to build so many houses in this country, why the countryside is getting concreted over.
The countryside is not getting concreted over, and we don't build enough houses. It's an absolute load of nonsense.
You're so utterly wrong on this.
I mean, apart from the facts. We found something we disagree on. I'm really excited.
80% of houses in this country that have been built in the last 20 years have gone to deal with the fact our population has expanded due to migration.
I mean, we need to build more houses. Yeah, I mean...
Because of migration.
No, yeah, we need to build more houses anyway, but yes, we need to build more houses, but we're not conquering it over the countryside. But I mean, you know, it is just insane. But again, I genuinely don't believe... I'm sorry, even if your lot got in again, I don't believe for a moment that you would end the mass migration. You know why? Because big business is addicted to it. This is how much it costs. Look, you'll have to pay more for your strawberries because we're having to pay more for people to pick the fruit in your orchards. Well, I mean, yeah, we're going to have to pay more, but you know what we'll pay a lot less for is for the benefits and the housing benefit and all of that for people.
And crime and policing. I mean, look, is it any wonder that when you now go to a supermarket to go and buy some food, it feels like you're going through airport security, and that's come about at a similar time. So we've had 20 years of mass uncontrolled migration.
Things that Ofcom are very keen to get involved in when you make these claims on air, despite the fact they are completely and utterly verified. That across Western Europe, every single country that has seen a mass influx of migrants, particularly from certain areas, Northern Africa and the Middle East in particular, have seen a massive increase in crime, acquisitive crime, violent crime, and particularly sex crimes as well. Apparently this is racist and bigoted to say this, as opposed to, no, it's a simple matter of fact that maybe people coming from very poor countries with very, very different cultural values from us might not share our values. I know. I'm as shocked as you are.
But Julia, these people need to pull the wool over people's eyes. They've been trying to do it for years. They have to ban us from saying these kind of things, because when the people start hearing about it, when they see the reality, they are calling, clamouring, desperate for change. And the reason this has come about so much is mass migration has now reached the scale where it is everywhere. It is pervasive. Every high street in this country, every supermarket. If you walk around the streets of London, 1 in 12 people you're seeing is an illegal migrant. It is at a level that people cannot ignore.
I had a thing on the way home from work last week. I think it was on a Monday, and a guy gets on my tube carriage, and he just stands there. And it's a tall, very fit, healthy-looking young man, and he's had a pot. And he's going, hello, and he's speaking with a foreign accent, of some sort of African accent. He was a black man. And he was starting his begging spiel. You get this on the London Underground all the time, and I went, no, sorry, no, you're not begging on the tube. It's a criminal offence to beg. You're not allowed to do that. Please get off the carriage, and no one should give you any money. And he goes, he didn't even argue with me. Just went, At which point, the usual sort of, Guardian reading little liberal, 2 or 3 seats down, goes, shut up. He actually said, shut up to me. I said, excuse me, I will not shut up. He goes, why are you talking to him like that? I went, because he's committing a criminal offence, and I have a right to sit on the train without someone committing a criminal offence right in front of me. He's a beggar, And I said, and I turned to the guy who was the beggar, and I said to him, look, you're either here legally, in which case get a job, stop begging, or you're here illegally, in which case go home. There are 2 options there. I think fair, reasonable statements of fact, right? At which point this guy goes to me, you're the white guy, you're racist. I went, who mentioned his colour? I only mentioned his colour because the guy said he had an African accent, and the man he was clearly foreign because of his accent, not because of the colour of his skin, because I wouldn't assume, it's certainly in London, that anyone was foreign because of the colour of their skin. And I just said, no. I said, well, what on earth are you talking about? The man is committing a criminal offence. He goes, oh, you're saying it's an offence, is it? Yes, because it is. He goes, oh, you know that, do you? I went, yes, I know that. He goes, how do you know that? And I said, well, because I'm a journalist and I cover these things, And he went, oh, right. He goes, I suppose you think you know more than me. And I went, mate, with all due respect, I'm pretty sure I know more than you about everything. But, either way. But what was fascinating was that the guy who was begging, he just tootles off. He's not going to challenge me because he knows perfectly well he's banged to rights. But I love the fact the first reaction from Mr. Liberal was it was racist. No, the guy is committing... This is able-bodied young man who could get a job anywhere, anywhere at all. He's not working, he's begging. It's organised criminality, as we know. But the fact that the reaction was, oh, but you're tackling this, you must be a racist, as opposed to, do you not think the problem is that this bloke is getting on a public transport and demanding people's money?
Yeah, it is not compassionate to stand up for this stuff, right, by the way, because that is a working age man that could, by the way, be contributing to his home economy, making that country better, and we could be supporting people properly that have got really complex needs to get off the streets.
Exactly.
It is not compassionate to be weak on this stuff. It really isn't.
I know, but he did his little virtue signal and he was happy. Anyway, 12:26 is the time. We're going to take a break. Then I want to hear from your thoughts, particularly on reform and the civil war that's going on. Whose side are you on, if anyone's? I'm on the side of the voter who desperately needs a party that is a viable alternative to the uni party. Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call.
Thousands of people. I think, if my figures are correct, I think 1,900 people came in just last week alone. We don't know. Some people are not, registering. They're just going on the run. And who knows, they could be going into terrorist cells in the country and nobody in the country ever knows who these people are.
Yeah.
And that's the really scary thing. And this is what, the organisation that we pay for, Prevent, is meant to prevent. And yet, it's just another attack waiting to happen.
It really is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. By the way, just want to bring you some breaking news, which I've now unhelpfully lost. Oh, goodness, yes, here we go. Extraordinary statement out of Moscow. The country's Foreign Intelligence Service has accused the UK of being the main instigator of global conflict and even blamed the Second World War on Britain. I think as the late Queen once said, recollections may differ in terms of what happened in 1939, but the country's Foreign Intelligence Service said London sees a threat to its interests in the US and Russia restoring relations, saying that the UK fears this will lead to the failure of the British strategy of containing Moscow, in which control over Ukraine occupies a central place. As we can see, London today, just as it did on the eve of both world wars of the last century, acts as the main instigator of the global conflict. Sam Armstrong, quick reaction to that.
Yeah, some people on Twitter and even some of our listeners think that Russia is our friend, right? That we should be getting on with these people. That's what they think about us. They think we're the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because we are. Because we are, but there we are. Let's go to phone calls. I'm going to get to these quickly. Apologies, I'm wittering on about the event on the tube and not getting your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Louise is in Kent. Good afternoon to you, Louise. What do you want to say about reform? Whose side are you on?
I tell you what, I am reading the report from November about Lee Anderson, who was reprimanded in Parliament for bullying the security guard. And it actually says in the report, I'm reading it to you now, it highlighted the power imbalance between Mr Anderson as an MP and the complainant as a security officer, and the importance of parliamentary behaviour code requirement that the respondent recognise his power, influence and authority and not to abuse them. So it would seem to me that it's okay to bully other people who aren't in your party. But when you're in your own party, you're not allowed to do that.
Because one of the claims is that Rupert Lowe is involved in bullying of staff. Although Rupert Lowe hit back over the weekend, and he said A, he denies it, and B, he says actually the claims were actually made against members of staff, he says, and not against him.
But my point is, Lee Anderson wasn't sanctioned or anything for in his own for what his behaviour to other members.
You're saying the rules are different. So what do you put this whole battle down to then?
Well, I think the trouble is, Rupert Lowe, Frank, he has the record of one of the most vocal in Parliament. Yeah. He works so hard in Parliament, calling everything out, and yet Farage, all he does is go to America and Trump and everything else.
No, but that's not true. If you look at the number of parliamentary questions table, look, Rupert Lowe's done magnificent work, Richard Tyers, Lee Anderson as well. But party leaders have different roles. Well, he's not spent the whole time in America. I know for a fact he's in his constituency pretty much every weekend.
Yeah, I get that. But also, we hear constantly that, people don't know who Rupert Lowe is and people like that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, OK, I get that. But the fifth one, I couldn't even tell you his name.
No, they don't want us to because, of course, he's got history.
If Nigel Farage is doing all these conferences with 5 MPs, why isn't he making an effort to push these people forward?
Boost them.
Everybody knows who all of them are.
That is a very good point. That actually, again, if you want to be a bigger party in wider appeal, you need to share out, some of the limelight. Yeah. So if you had to say whose side you're on,
Can I just make a point about COVID?
Okay, very quickly.
I lost my mum from COVID.
Yeah.
Right. Now, afterwards, I was in no social bubble. It almost destroyed me.
Yeah.
If Mum hadn't have died of COVID, frankly, we wouldn't have got through the social bubble with her. And she wouldn't be coping with the world now. She was ill for 2 weeks. And in many ways, I only remember her as she was, beautifully dressed, beautifully made up. Whereas actually, if she'd been alive now, she wouldn't be coping at all. We'd be having terrible problems. And actually, it did more damage to me and things afterwards, the lockdowns and everything else. And I have actually said now, if we had another lockdown, I'm afraid I would say this out loud now, I will end it. I won't go through another lockdown.
Well,
it almost destroyed.
I would never want you to do that. And I'm very sorry for your loss. Again, lots of people lost loved ones to COVID and many other reasons over those years. But no. Just if you were going to say look, I just wouldn't obey it. I wouldn't. I'm going to say it right now. I wouldn't. I mean, I've always had to say I had to obey the law. I wouldn't. I'd be marching on Parliament. I wouldn't be obeying that at all. I would never allow that to happen again. Louise, thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Let's go to Nigel. He's in Peebles. Nigel, your thoughts on reform? Are you on anyone's side, and if so, whose?
No, I don't know which side I'm on because I don't know who's telling the truth.
Yeah.
And none of us voters know who's telling the truth. They've lost 50% support, I would say, over this at the moment.
No, I doubt very much they've lost 50% support.
Well,
most people probably aren't even aware of it. They're busy getting on with their lives.
Possibly not. But what they need to do to put it to bed is hold a live YouTube video conference hosted by the KC they've appointed and robustly question Zia, Nigel, Rupert and Lee and let us, the voters, see what the truth actually is, and then we can make up our mind.
So a public airing of the dirty laundry. So I would suggest that's the worst thing they could do, and actually the whole thing should have been kept private.
It should have been kept private, but it hasn't. Rupert's put it into the public domain, Nigel's put it into the public domain, and Zira's put it into the public domain. Unless they complete it in the public domain, they will never sit on it. We will all end up with our own opinions, and as it stands at the moment, I was a Reform voter. I'm not at the moment till I see how this plays out, and I can't personally...
Oh, that was... we've lost him. There's a conspiracy there. Losing Nigel at that crucial moment. He doesn't. I think he was going to say he doesn't think he will go back. Sam Armstrong, just yes or no, as someone who advises on these things, would playing this out publicly with interviews on YouTube, would that be? I mean, we'd love to host that, by the way, boys, if you want to do that. No. I thought not. 12:36 is the time. We're going to take a break. Up next, we are going to be talking to a Reform UK activist and a former parliamentary candidate to talk about where, well, he stands and what he understands is really going on behind the scenes. That's up next. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. 12:38 is the time. Sam Armstrong still with me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now more about what is going on with that Reform Civil War with Myron Senthil-Nathan, who's a Reform UK activist and a former parliamentary candidate as well. Very good afternoon to you, Myron.
Good to be with you, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Now, look, I in no way feel second place. Do not in any way take this as an insult. I really absolutely don't mean it as that. But, you know, Nigel Farage too busy, Richard Tice, Rupert Lowe, Zia Youssef, everyone's very busy today, lots of people who've left the party a bit too busy. Seems like lots of people, after everyone's aired their dirty laundry into the newspapers and on social media, now suddenly everyone's going, zip it, let's stay quiet. Do you know what's going on and whose side are you on?
I don't have inside information. I've obviously met a lot of the HQ. They're lovely guys. Richard Tice in particular has been really supportive to me. Met Nigel a couple of times as well. But look, I mean, the Reform Party carries the hopes and dreams of millions of people and the whole legacy, perhaps, of this country to be resurrected. And it's a terrible shame. And I used to think Nigel Farage was the one who, the once-in-a-lifetime campaigner who cut through the electorate. Rupert Lowe was a details man, very, very strong on migration and the mass rape gangs. And together they made a winning combination. But I think this is a massive wake-up call. And I want to just be straight with you, Julia, because I know you're straight talking and your viewers are straight talking as well. This is not a storm in a teacup. This is something very, very serious. On the backdrop of Ben Habib being sidelined, who is quite a patriotic figure, a details man. And then you have Rupert Lowe, again, a very forthright, patriotic figure, a details man. The optics of this don't look good. And I think it's a massive wake-up call for HQ to understand that this has to be a party that is a government in waiting, not just a protest party.
Well, that was one of the points, wasn't it, that Rupert Lowe made in his interview with the Mail, which we're told by him, it seemed to, you know, sort of launched all this, sparked all this concern in head office. And again, that's not what's being said by by Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and others. But there was his interview, and he said, look, we have to, you know, we can no longer be a protest party, you know, led by the Messiah. This is about sort of broadening things out. That said, there's been some disputes over policy. Rupert Lowe kind of, you know, making policy up on the hoof, talking about mass deportations now, I mean, of illegal migrants. I mean, I don't know why anyone's got a problem with that. It seems to me, is that not, I mean, are you not supposed to deport people who are here in the country illegally? It seemed to me that should be every party's policy, in my view. But I don't think there's anything controversial for the vast majority of the voters. But it did look like that Rupert Lowe was perhaps going a little bit, you know, off in his own tangent. And part of being a serious party is that people have got to toe the line. It's like when you see, you know, shadow cabinet or cabinet members having to go on media and that morning media round and say stuff that you know, I know, and everyone knows they don't believe, but they're having to back government policy that day. It's kind of part of the deal. Or do people expect something different from reform and they want people to be talking, you know, saying what they really think all the time?
I think the argument against policy and kind of the governmentalisation of the party is that we've only been around for 7 months since the general election, 7-8 months since the general election, so give us time and so on. Yeah. But the thing is this, when you rise in the polls and you're number one, the scrutiny increases. Yeah. And so the expectation increases. And the thing that the public are placing all their hopes and dreams on this party, and when they've been lied to continuously about stopping the boats, immigration and so on, they want to know that a party can actually fix things, that it's not just about slogans. And this is the transition and the wake-up call that I think HQ really needs to get under their belt, because we've gone through the protest phase, we're going through and almost gone through the professionalisation phase. Yeah. The governmentalisation of the party is absolutely urgent now, even if the election's about 3-4 years away.
But isn't that what Zia Yusuf was brought in to do, the chairman of the party? He's been on the show many times. I've always found him talks an awful lot of sense to me. A lot of people who are getting in touch on social media saying he's part of the problem. He's the one who's had the battle with Rupert Lowe, we understand. Again, everyone's denying everything on every side, so it's quite difficult to know what really happened, as one of our callers has pointed out a little bit earlier, Nigel, different Nigel, by the way, no relation. But that actually, you know, one of the things he was trying to do is professionalise the party, get the organisation going. But there seems to be quite a lot of animosity towards him as well.
I'm cautious about taking a simplistic view and, you know, jumping on a bandwagon saying Zia's using him as a scapegoat. I mean, he's done a fantastic job in a short space of time to create so many grassroots structures across the country. But what the party urgently needs is diversification of influence, at least, and articulation and representation. At the moment, the party is there's a bottleneck with Nigel, Zia, Richard Tice, maybe Lee and Anderson poking in here and there. And if this is a government in waiting, as I said, governmentalisation, policy and all of those things, we need a variety of voices, men and women from across the board, to show the British public and give them hope and real credibility, give the party credibility that we are actually going to fix things. And we're actually going to change this country and give the country the handbrake turn it needs.
And you've got enough good people to form a cabinet.
Exactly.
Are you going to stand again next election?
If they'll have me, I'll stand again.
OK, really good to hear from you. Myron Centel-Nathan, former Reform parliamentary candidate and Reform UK activist to this day as well. Thank you for that. Interesting to hear that view so much. I just do get the impression that most party activists and supporters of reform are just tearing their hair out saying, oh, for the love of God, get your act together.
Yeah, and Rupert has a particularly strong profile amongst those people that are very engaged, that watch, you know, shows like this, that contribute to the conversation on Twitter and go up and turn up at these events. And that's why it's so dangerous for reform, is that amongst the people that are most engaged, there'll be an awful lot of sympathy here. They have to deal with this situation and deal with it quickly. Otherwise, it is going to bite into them and it's going to just get worse and worse and worse. It could cost them, I think, as much as 5 points possibly in the May elections.
And that's absolutely crucial.
That is massive for them, massive for them.
Yeah, people do not like divided parties. End of. They do not. I'm just going to bring you some breaking news. We've got lots of breaking news this morning. Following reports that the Palestinian Abu Wadi, who called for the killing of all Jews, supports Hamas and Al-Aqsa, arriving in the UK in a small boat last week, identified by a Jewish charity rather than by the authorities, which makes you wonder what they're actually doing. A man in his 30s was arrested yesterday evening by immigration enforcement for entry without leave, linked to those reports. Now, again, good sign if that is the case, that somebody who could pose a threat to this country has been arrested. However, bit worrying that if it is this man, and if these reports are true, that anyone was allowed to come into this country and basically, after fingerprints and put you in a hotel or a hostel, and then you're free to go, sir, sitting on a British street, filming himself, a picture of himself with in a cafe, for goodness sake, having a coffee, on our streets for 3 or 4 or 5 days without any security whatsoever. God knows what could happen in that time. Apparently has been arrested now. Let's be clear, though. Absolutely nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened until that man's face was splashed across the front of a national newspaper. The government are not checking. They are not doing the basic checks that we would expect, and that's why newspapers, charities, organisations are able to find these cases, and that's what should worry us most. It's actually, oh right, we can go and arrest them. We can go and bring them all in. Why aren't we doing it all the time? Because all of these people are coming to the country without leave to enter. More checks on us when we go through, Luton Airport, for goodness sake. It's just mind-blowing. Oh, well done, the authorities, for doing the job we pay you to do. Oh, well done. Thank you very much for keeping us safe. Now, God knows what could have happened in the last 5 days. God knows. It's just a matter of luck. It really is. It is just extraordinary. We have to continue to live like this. I just don't know how long people are going to put up with this utter madness. It's insane. It's insane if you don't protect the borders of your country. But there we are. 12:47 this time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about why on earth Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, is going to allow the NHS to carry a trial out for puberty blockers. We've already banned them. We already know they're dangerous for children. We already know there's no good that can come of giving kids puberty blockers. But no, they're going to allow it. We're going to talk to a man who's going to try and stop it. That's James Esses. He's up next. This is Talk.
what are you hearing on the streets?
Well, what I'm hearing is that, you know, the public support for Netanyahu is very, very low. It's fading away. You know, at the same time, when you ask people, well, who would you prefer? The problem is that there's no obvious replacement. So whilst his ratings, if you like, are at an all-time low, nor is there an immediate solution for that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. 12:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Let's talk puberty blockers. I don't know why we're talking about puberty blockers. They were banned on the NHS and were moving towards a ban, I think, in the private sector as well, after the Cass review showed that, as we already knew, and anyone who cared to look, that they were not safe. They had no benefits for youngsters who were confused about their gender identity, and they had huge risks. Why then has the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, apparently decided not to intervene to prevent a puberty blocker trial to give these drugs to children once again on the NHS? Well, let's talk about this with psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy, James Essis. Very good afternoon to you, James.
Afternoon, Julia.
I mean, I don't know why we need a trial. We've had a trial of these drugs. They've been used around the world, including in the UK, given out to children like sweeties, it would appear, by the Tavistock Clinic in North London in the NHS. We know the damage they can do. We know the road they lead children down on. We know the impact. We know the health risks. We know there's really no benefit from them. And yet, why do we need a trial? And why is the Health Secretary not stopping this from going ahead?
Well, precisely. You know, I couldn't believe it when we heard that they were being banned. And it turns out that this has been a bit of a fudge. It's not a permanent ban, it's just an indefinite ban to be reviewed in a few years' time. Oh, and by the way, we're going to offer this trial in which potentially thousands of children will be able to access the drugs anyway. I mean, essentially, it's a workaround. The whole thing's a fudge. And, you know, I wouldn't even use the term guinea pigs to describe these children, because if we talk about guinea pigs, that's in the context of medical experiments where we don't know the outcome. Well, we do know the outcome here because we've done the studies, we've got the research, the lives have already been destroyed. Yeah. Puberty blockers do irreversible physical and emotional damage to these children and set them down a one-way path towards further irreversible medicalisation and regret. So we would be treating children as worse than guinea pigs if this trial proceeds.
Yeah, and again, I just find it extraordinary that, you know, people are told, you know, oh, we don't want to give your child paracetamol or any antibiotics unless necessary. But yeah, let's give these drugs, which we use to chemically castrate sex offenders, and let's give them to children's developing bodies. It is mind-blowing to me that this was ever allowed. It's mind-blowing to me that anyone would still defend it after the Cass review, which was incredibly wide-ranging, looked into all the impacts. The evidence, as you and I know, and as you know to your cost in terms of your training as a psychotherapist, that you know the evidence was clear for years now around the world that these were not drugs that were just temporary hold off puberty as they were sold, so that confused children could decide what they want to do later on. They have a permanent impact. They affect children's general physical health, certainly their mental health. They prevent brain development that happens during puberty as well. They prevent basically children going on to having the sex organs they're supposed to have. They put them on a train down to a road where children become infertile as adults, never able to have sexual gratification at all. A key part of most people's human existence, of most long-term fulfilling, you know, romantic relationships. Nope. Not an option anymore. And we know from the Cass review, again, what parents are told, that, you know, well, you know, puberty blockers or your child might commit suicide. Again, horrible stats that are forced out by trans campaigners that simply are not true. And the idea that these are reversible, again, not true.
No, and irrespective of the long list of physical and emotional harms that you just stated, going through the trial like this sends a message that puberty is something that children should be afraid of, something that needs to be treated or medicalised. What we need to be encouraging is for children to go through their natural puberty as they have done since time immemorial. It may be unpleasant, they may struggle with parts of their body. By and large, people get over it. And if they don't, explorative therapy is the answer, not medication. You know, there's an issue around informed consent here as well, because a prerequisite for being given puberty blockers is that you are diagnosed with a mental health condition. So we've got young, vulnerable children suffering from a mental health condition, and they're expected to be able to consent to medication that
or even if parents consent on their behalf, parents who've been terrified and lied to by trans activists. And again, I always worried about this, that once this, even with this ban and the Cass review, and so many sensible people, oh, thank goodness, a lot of people, and I was very angry with an awful lot of people going, oh, I didn't realise all of these things. Oh, well, in that case, when in fact that evidence was easily available and widely out there. I mean, I was able to find it, you were able to find it. I don't know why they involved in it weren't able to find it, but it was very clear to me, a lot of people working at the Tavistock Clinic, working in this gender dysphoria field, although there were many very good people who left these organisations because they were so horrified, and there were whistleblowers and talking about it. But actually, an awful lot of people, they just basically wanted to carry on, and they were going to, we'll prescribe privately. Now they're going to be able to just put thousands of children onto these drugs and claim it's part of a trial, even though there was a trial back in 2011, but they never bothered doing any follow-up because they were that unbothered. This is such an outrageous abuse of children. It is of vulnerable children, when we know that the vast majority of the children who go onto these drugs have been victims of sexual abuse, have severe autism or other learning disabilities, or actually just quite simply are gay. They're just gay. And they just and that somehow they've got the message in their family that being gay is not going to be acceptable. And it is so heartbreaking. But what I do love to know, I'm delighted to see this morning, that you, along with Keira Bell, someone who has gone through this and is one of the victims of this awful ideology, who is detransition, that you are going to propose a challenge to this if this does go ahead.
Yes, well, Keira unfortunately knows more than most the devastating consequences of these puberty blockers. We've written to the government already. As at the moment, the trial has only been proposed. It hasn't yet got official confirmation and the go-ahead, but we've written to them. We've got a legal team in place. We've got the funding in place. Brilliant. If they decide to push ahead with this, we will be trying to take a judicial review against this, because this isn't just a government failing to protect its children from harm. This will be a government actively and knowingly harming.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm sure our audience will happily contribute to that crowdfund. I know I will. Really great work, James Esses. You've been so fantastic on this call. Psychotherapist and founder of Just Therapy, James Esses there. A final word on that to Sam Armstrong.
Yeah, I just wonder, Wes Streeting got massive plaudits for this. You just can't trust them, because
he seems like one of the sane people, right?
But the first time that the cameras aren't looking, they're back to their old tricks. It drives me up the wall.
It's the thing is, this isn't even a matter for debate right now. You're either in favour of basically completely mutilating and damaging children's bodies and minds, or you're not. And I don't know how you can be on the first side. I just don't know. There's no excuse now. You did know. You're choosing it. I mean, this is frankly, this is up there with like Nazi medical experiments as far as I'm concerned. It is that awful. It's just shocking. But there we are. Thank God for people like James Esses and Keira Bell and others who campaign on this stuff. Delighted to say Ian Collins is here to tell us what's happening on his show. Very good afternoon to you.
Afternoon. It's like I'm in the room with patient zero.
Oh, God, everyone's blaming me.
You know, I was off on Friday.
Yeah, but, you know, no one believes that.
I was off. I woke up, it was
just
like
had a nice afternoon.
It was like somebody had anchored a goat to every limb